blood mixed with rain on the emergency room floor. Eliza Vale pressed her hand against cracked ribs while nurses rushed past her like she didn't exist. She had survived 5 years of graveyard shifts and nursing school debt, but the men who attacked her tonight hadn't wanted money. They had wanted her alive. Then the hospital went silent. Security guards froze, and Massimo DeLuca walked through those doors, cold, scarred, dangerous, the heir to America's most feared crime family. He looked at her like she was already dead, or worse, like she was the answer to a question that could destroy them both. If you want to see how deep this war goes, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights above Eliza's head buzzed like trapped insects. She sat on the edge of a plastic chair in the Blackwater City emergency room, holding a blood-soaked paper towel against her split lip. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from pain. She had learned to live with pain years ago, but from the look in those men's eyes right before they grabbed her. They had been waiting. "Miss Vale?" A nurse with tired eyes glanced at her clipboard. "We're running about 2 hours behind. You can wait over—" "I'm fine." Eliza stood too fast. Her vision tilted. The nurse reached out to steady her, but Eliza jerked away. "I said I'm fine." The nurse's expression shifted from concern to irritation. "Suit yourself." Eliza pressed her back against the wall near the vending machines, away from the crowd. Her ribcage felt like broken glass grinding together with every breath. She had made it 3 blocks before collapsing on someone's front steps, gasping into her phone for an ambulance. The rain had soaked through her diner uniform. The name tag still pinned to her chest read Eliza in faded letters. 26 years old. 2 semesters away from a nursing degree she couldn't afford. Working doubles at a place called Lucky's Diner where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber and the tips barely covered her rent. And now this. She touched the side of her face where the bigger man had grabbed her. His grip had been professional, controlled, not the fumbling violence of a desperate mugger. He had known exactly where to hit her to keep her conscious but compliant. Why? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking fingers. Number? You shouldn't have gone to the hospital. Eliza's stomach dropped. She scanned the crowded waiting room, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. Families with sick children, old men coughing into their sleeves, a drunk kid bleeding from his forehead. Anyone could be watching. She typed back with trembling thumbs, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Unknown number. Someone who just made a very expensive mistake trying to keep you alive." Before she could process that, the atmosphere in the emergency room changed. It happened fast. Security guards near the entrance straightened. A nurse dropped her clipboard. Conversations died mid-sentence. 3 men in dark suits walked through the automatic doors like they owned the building. No. Like they owned the entire city block and everyone in it. 2 of them flanked the entrance with the kind of stillness that suggested military training. The third walked straight toward the triage desk. Eliza didn't recognize him until he turned his head and the overhead lights caught the scar running from his left temple down to his jaw. Massimo DeLuca. Everyone in Blackwater City knew that name. The newspapers called him a businessman. The police called him untouchable. People on the street called him a lot of things, but never to his face. He was 32 years old and controlled more of the city's underground economy than the mayor controlled traffic lights. His family had built their empire on construction contracts, union influence, and carefully buried bodies that occasionally surfaced in the harbor. And he was walking toward Eliza. She pressed herself harder against the wall, her pulse hammered in her throat. Massimo moved through the crowded waiting room like water parting around a stone. People shifted unconsciously to give him space. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and probably cost more than Eliza made in 6 months. He stopped 3 feet away from her. "Eliza Vale." His voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command a room. "You need to come with me. I don't know who you are." The lie tasted bitter on her split lip. Massimo's expression didn't change. His eyes were black. Not brown, not dark gray, but genuinely black in a way that made her skin crawl. "The men who attacked you work for an organization that took something from me. Your leverage they don't get to keep. I'm not going anywhere with you." That wasn't a request. One of his men stepped closer. Eliza's hand moved instinctively to her pocket where she kept her pepper spray, but she had lost it during the attack. She had nothing, no weapon, no exit strategy, no idea what the hell was happening. Massimo tilted his head slightly. You can walk out of here with me right now, or you can wait for the police to show up and start asking questions you don't have answers to. Either way, you're not safe here. Why would I be safer with you? Something flickered in his expression. Not quite emotion. More like recognition of a reasonable question. Because the people looking for you want information. I just want to know why my brother spent the last 3 months following you around Blackwater City before he disappeared. Eliza's breath caught. What? Massimo pulled a phone from his jacket and held it up. The screen showed a photograph taken from across the street. Eliza leaving Lucky's diner at the end of her shift, exhausted and oblivious. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago. He swiped to the next image. Eliza at the grocery store, then outside her apartment building, then at the library where she studied between shifts. My brother Luca took these. Massimo's voice was cold, clinical. He's been obsessed with you since February. I didn't know until tonight when I started looking for him and found a storage unit full of surveillance photos, traffic camera footage, and background checks on everyone you've ever spoken to. Eliza felt dizzy. I don't know your brother. I've never... I know. Massimo pocketed the phone. That's what makes this interesting. Luca was investigating something, and you're connected to it whether you realize it or not. 2 hours ago, someone grabbed him outside a warehouse near the docks. Same people who sent those men after you. That's not my problem. It became your problem the moment you walked into that emergency room and triggered every security alert between here and the harbor. He glanced at one of his men, who nodded toward the entrance. We have maybe 5 minutes before this building is surrounded by people who don't care about witness statements or collateral damage. Eliza looked past him toward the triage desk. A nurse was staring at them with the phone pressed to her ear. 2 security guards hovered near the exit, uncertain whether to intervene. If I leave with you, Eliza said quietly, what happens to me? Massimo's expression was unreadable. You answer my questions. You stay alive. And maybe we figure out what your connection is to my brother before someone else does. And if I refuse, then I leave you here and send flowers to your funeral. It wasn't a threat. It was a prediction delivered with the certainty of a man who had seen enough violence to recognize the patterns. Eliza pushed off the wall. Pain shot through her ribs, but she forced herself to stand straight. I want your word that you won't hurt me. You don't get my word. You get my self-interest. Right now, keeping you breathing is more valuable than anything else. He turned without waiting for her response. We're leaving, now. She followed him because she didn't have a better option. The moment they stepped outside, rain hammered down from a sky that looked like bruised metal. 2 black SUVs idled at the curb with their engines running. Massimo opened the rear door of the first vehicle and gestured for her to get inside. Eliza hesitated. I can have Marco pick you up and put you in the car, Massimo said. Or you can get in yourself. Choose fast. She climbed inside. The interior smelled like leather and gun oil. Massimo slid in beside her and pulled the door shut. The driver didn't wait for instructions. The SUV pulled away from the curb as the second vehicle fell in behind them. They drove in silence through the rain-soaked streets of Blackwater City. Eliza watched the familiar buildings blur past the tinted windows. The shuttered storefronts, the graffiti-covered bus stops, the late-night convenience stores where she used to buy instant ramen when money got tight. Where are we going? She finally asked. Somewhere secure. That's not an answer. Massimo glanced at her. You're not in a position to demand answers. Then why did you take me? Because someone is hunting you, and I need to know why. The SUV turned onto a highway on-ramp. They accelerated into the sparse late-night traffic, heading north toward the outskirts of the city where the streetlights grew farther apart and the neighborhoods gave way to industrial parks. Eliza pressed her hand against her ribs. The pain was getting worse. I need a doctor. You'll get one. When? When we arrive. She wanted to scream at him, to demand he turn the car around and let her go back to her shitty apartment and her graveyard shifts and her student loan debt. But she could still feel those men's hands on her, could still hear the way the bigger one had said, don't kill her, like he was giving directions to a mechanic. What's your brother's name? She asked. Luca. What does he look like? What? Massimo pulled his phone out again and showed her a photograph. A young man in his mid-20s with dark hair and a sharp smile, handsome in an arrogant way, wearing a leather jacket and standing in front of what looked like a sports car. Eliza studied the image. I've never seen him before. You sure? Positive. Massimo pocketed the phone. Then why was he following you? I don't know. Think harder. I'm a waitress, Eliza said through clenched teeth. I work doubles at a diner, I go to school when I can afford the tuition, and I barely make rent every month. I'm nobody. There's nothing about me worth following. Someone disagrees. The SUV turned off the highway onto a narrow road that cut through dense trees. No streetlights now, just the headlights cutting through the rain and the sound of tires on wet asphalt. They drove for another 10 minutes before iron gates appeared ahead, flanked by security cameras and motion sensors. The gates opened automatically. They drove through and up a long driveway that curved between manicured lawns and ornamental trees. Then the house came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as an estate. 3 stories of stone and glass, floodlights illuminating the perimeter. Armed men in dark clothing stationed near every entrance. The kind of place that appeared in architectural magazines under the category of luxury real estate, but functioned as something far more dangerous. The SUV stopped under a covered portico. Massimo opened his door and stepped out without looking back. One of his men opened Eliza's door and waited. She climbed out slowly. Rain pounded the roof above her head. The air smelled like wet grass and money. This way. Massimo walked toward the entrance. Eliza followed because she didn't know what else to do. Inside, the house was all marble floors and expensive art. A chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling like frozen rain. Somewhere deeper in the building, she heard voices, low conversations that stopped the moment Massimo appeared. He led her down a hallway lined with closed doors. At the end, he pushed open a heavy wooden door and gestured for her to enter. The room beyond was some kind of private office. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds, a desk covered in papers and a laptop still glowing with an open spreadsheet. Sit. Massimo pointed at a leather chair near the desk. Eliza sat. Her ribs screamed in protest. You said you'd get me a doctor. I did. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Reyes, I need you here. Now. A pause. I don't care. Wake up and drive. He ended the call. Eliza stared at him. What do you want from me? Massimo leaned against the edge of his desk. I want to know what Luca discovered. I want to know who took him. And I want to know why a 26-year-old waitress from Blackwater City is the center of a conspiracy that's about to start a war I didn't ask for. I don't know anything about a conspiracy. Then we're going to find out together. He crossed his arms. Tell me about your family. What? Your parents, siblings, anyone who might be connected to organized crime, offshore banking, or international smuggling. Eliza laughed. It came out bitter and wrong. My mom died when I was 10. Cancer. My dad died 2 years later in a car accident. I've been on my own since I was 12, bouncing between foster homes until I aged out of the system. There's no criminal empire, no offshore accounts, just me trying to survive. Massimo's expression didn't change. What did your father do for a living? He was an accountant, small firm, nothing special. Name of the firm? I don't remember. I was 12. Try. Eliza closed her eyes. The pain in her ribs was making it hard to think. Mercer and Associates. Something like that. Massimo straightened. Gideon Mercer? I don't know. Maybe. He pulled out his phone again and started typing. His jaw tightened as he read something on the screen. Gideon Mercer is a financial attorney. High-end clients. Offshore accounts. The kind of man who makes problems disappear for people with enough money. So your father worked for him? Massimo looked up. And 3 weeks ago, Mercer's office contacted you about an inheritance. Eliza's blood went cold. How do you know that? Because Luca documented everything. Phone records, email logs, bank statements. He knew someone was going to make a move on you, and he was trying to figure out why. Massimo moved closer. What did Mercer tell you? He said my father left a trust fund, that I needed to come to his office to sign paperwork to unlock it. Did you go? Not yet. I kept putting it off because I didn't believe it. My dad died broke. There's no trust fund. Massimo's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. We have a problem. Before Eliza could ask, the door burst open. A man in tactical gear entered fast, weapon drawn. We have movement on the south perimeter. 4 vehicles, no plates. Massimo's entire demeanor shifted. The cold businessman vanished, replaced by something far more dangerous. Lock it down. No one gets through the gate. They're not trying to get through. The man's voice was tight. They're setting up a perimeter. Massimo looked at Eliza. For the first time since she met him, she saw something close to anger in his eyes. Who else knows you're here? No one. Think. I don't know. Eliza stood, ignoring the pain. I don't know who those people are or why they're following me or what any of this has to do with my dead father. Gunfire erupted outside. Not the sharp crack of a pistol. The sustained roar of automatic weapons tearing through the night. Glass shattered somewhere in the house. Alarms blared. Men shouted orders in Italian. Massimo grabbed Eliza's arm and dragged her toward a bookshelf on the far wall. He pressed something hidden behind a leather-bound volume, and the entire shelf swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Move! He shoved her toward the opening. What's happening? Someone just declared war. He followed her into the passage and pulled the bookshelf closed behind them. Emergency lights flickered on, illuminating concrete steps that spiraled downward. And you're the reason why. They descended 3 levels into what looked like a reinforced bunker. Steel doors, climate control systems, enough supplies to survive a siege. Massimo led her through a maze of corridors until they reached a secure room lined with monitors showing live feeds from around the estate. Men in tactical gear were breaching the perimeter. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. 2 of Massimo's guards went down before they reached cover. The attackers moved with military precision, advancing through the grounds like they had practiced this exact assault. Who are they? Eliza whispered. Massimo's jaw was tight. Volkov Syndicate, Russian. If they're moving on my house, it means they think you're worth starting a war. Why? He turned to look at her. Because whatever your father took from them is worth more than your life. Or mine. On the monitors, the attackers reached the main house. Smoke grenades detonated. Flashbangs turned the darkness white. Men poured through shattered windows and kicked down doors. And somewhere 3 levels above them, Eliza heard the sound of her ordinary life finally dying. Massimo pulled a gun from a hidden compartment in the wall and checked the magazine. You need to tell me everything about your father. Right now. Every detail you remember. I told you, he was an accountant. He wasn't just an accountant. Massimo's voice cut through her panic. Men like Gideon Mercer don't hire accountants. They hire fixers. People who know how to hide money, move assets, and disappear evidence. He moved closer. Your father found something he wasn't supposed to find. And 15 years later, people are still killing for it. Eliza's legs gave out. She collapsed against the concrete wall, clutching her broken ribs. I don't know what he found. Then we're going to figure it out. Because in about 10 minutes, those men are going to breach this bunker. And when they do, an explosion rocked the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Massimo grabbed a second weapon and handed it to Eliza. She stared at the gun like it was a live snake. I don't know how to use that. Safety's off. Point and pull the trigger. He moved toward the door. Stay behind me. Don't hesitate. And whatever you do, don't let them take you alive. The last thing Eliza wanted was to hold a gun. But the sound of boots thundering down the corridor made the choice for her. She wrapped her fingers around the grip. And somewhere in the darkness above them, the war finally found its way inside. The boots grew louder. Eliza's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the gun. Massimo stood at the bunker door with his weapon raised, his breathing controlled in a way that suggested he had done this before. Many times before. How many rounds? Eliza's voice came out as a whisper. 15. Massimo didn't look at her. His eyes tracked the corridor beyond the reinforced door through a small observation window. Make them count. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed down like a physical weight. Then a voice echoed through the concrete passage. Calm. Almost pleasant. Massimo DeLuca. We can do this the civilized way, or we can do this the Russian way. Your choice. Massimo's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. The voice continued. We know the girl is with you. We know what she represents. Send her out, and we leave your estate standing. Keep her, and we burn everything you've built to the ground. Eliza's pulse hammered in her throat. What do they mean? What I represent? Shut up. Massimo's tone was flat, final. Don't tell me to eat. I said shut up. He moved away from the door and grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. You want to know what you represent? You're a key. A very expensive, very dangerous key that unlocks something worth more than this entire city. And right now, everyone with a gun and a grudge wants to use you. I don't know what you're talking about. Then start remembering. He released her and moved back to the door. Because in about 30 seconds, those men are going to breach this room, and if you can't give me something useful, we're both dead. Eliza's mind raced. Her father, the accountant, the car accident that wasn't really an accident, the trust fund that shouldn't exist. None of it made sense. She was a waitress. She was nobody. The explosion came without warning. The bunker door blew inward in a spray of twisted metal and concrete dust. The shockwave threw Eliza backward into the monitors. Her head cracked against something hard. Vision blurred, ears ringing. Through the smoke, figures moved fast. Massimo fired 3 times. A man dropped. Then another. But there were too many. They poured through the opening like water through a broken dam, spreading out with tactical precision. Someone grabbed Eliza from behind. She twisted, tried to break free, but the grip was iron. The gun fell from her hands and clattered across the floor. Got her! The man's accent was thick, Eastern European. Southeast corner! Massimo spun and fired. The bullet caught the man in the shoulder. He screamed and released Eliza, stumbling backward. She scrambled for the fallen weapon, but a boot kicked it away before her fingers reached it. A different man stood over her now, older, scarred. He pointed his weapon at her head with the casual indifference of someone who had killed enough people to stop keeping count. Don't move, Devichka. His voice was gravel and cigarettes. You're worth more alive, but only slightly. Massimo fired again. The scarred man ducked behind a support column, cursing in Russian. The bunker had become a maze of shadows and muzzle flashes. Eliza couldn't tell who was winning. She only knew she was on her knees in the middle of a war she didn't understand. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. The emergency systems had failed. Men shouted in multiple languages. Someone fired blindly and hit the wall inches from Eliza's head. Concrete fragments rained down. Hands grabbed her in the dark. Different hands this time, familiar. Move, Massimo's voice in her ear. Now. He dragged her toward what felt like another passage. She stumbled over something soft, a body, and nearly fell. Massimo kept her upright, kept her moving. Behind them, flashlights cut through the darkness. Orders barked in Russian. They ran through a tunnel that smelled like mold and stale air. Eliza's ribs screamed with every breath. Blood ran down the side of her face from where her head had hit the monitors. She couldn't see anything, could only follow the pull of Massimo's hand and trust he knew where he was going. The tunnel opened into a garage. Generator-powered lights flickered on automatically. 3 vehicles waited in the dim space, 2 motorcycles and an armored SUV. Massimo shoved Eliza toward the SUV. Get in, driver's seat. I can't. You're driving. He tossed her the keys and moved to the garage door controls. Start the engine. When that door opens, you floor it. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just drive. Eliza climbed into the driver's seat with shaking hands. The keys slipped between her fingers twice before she managed to jam them into the ignition. The engine roared to life. Massimo hit a button on the wall, and the garage door began rolling upward with agonizing slowness. Gunfire erupted behind them. The Russians had found the tunnel. Go! Massimo fired back toward the passage entrance as he ran for the passenger side. Drive! Eliza slammed her foot on the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward before Massimo had fully closed his door. They burst through the rising garage door with inches to spare, scraping metal against metal. The vehicle bounced onto a service road that cut through the woods behind the estate. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Bullets punched through the rear window. Safety glass spiderwebbed, but held. Faster! Massimo twisted in his seat and fired out the broken window. They're following! Eliza pressed the accelerator to the floor. The SUV's engine screamed. Trees blurred past on both sides. The narrow road twisted through the darkness like a snake, and she had no idea where it led. Where am I going? Away from here. Massimo ejected an empty magazine and slammed in a fresh one. Take the first left. There's a highway 3 miles north. And then what? Then we figure out who the hell you really are. The left turn came up fast. Eliza yanked the wheel. The SUV's tires screamed. For a moment, she thought they would flip, but the vehicle held. They fishtailed onto another dirt road, this one even narrower. Behind them, headlights appeared. 2 vehicles. Maybe 3. Gaining fast. Massimo leaned out the window and fired. One of the pursuing vehicles swerved, crashed into a tree, and exploded in a ball of orange flame. But the others kept coming. The highway finally appeared ahead, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the wilderness. Eliza didn't slow down. She hit the on-ramp at 60 miles per hour and merged into sparse late-night traffic. A semi-truck blared its horn as they cut in front of it. Get off at exit 47. Massimo was checking his phone, tracking something on the screen. We need to disappear before they get organized. Eliza's entire body was shaking. Adrenaline burned through her veins like poison. Your house is gone. They'll burn it to ash to cover their tracks. His voice was flat. No emotion, just calculation. Everything in that building is evidence now. Evidence the police will never see. Those were people. Your people. They knew what they signed up for. Massimo didn't look at her. Exit 47. Don't miss it. She took the exit too fast. The SUV's tires screamed again. They rocketed down a ramp into an industrial area. Warehouses and shuttered factories and empty parking lots stretching into darkness. Turn right at the intersection, then left, then right again. Eliza followed his directions without questioning. They wound through the industrial maze until Massimo finally told her to stop in front of a warehouse that looked abandoned. Graffiti covered the walls. Broken windows stared down like empty eyes. Kill the engine. Massimo opened his door and stepped out, weapon still in hand. He scanned the area with practiced efficiency. Come on. Eliza climbed out on trembling legs. What is this place? Somewhere they won't look, not immediately. He moved to the warehouse's side entrance and pulled out a key. The door opened with a rusty groan. Inside. The warehouse interior was a single cavernous space filled with shadows and the smell of old motor oil. Massimo led her to a corner where someone had set up a makeshift living area. A cot, a table, a few chairs, and a portable generator. He hit a switch. Fluorescent lights flickered on overhead, revealing walls covered in photographs and documents connected by red string. It looked like something from a detective thriller. Conspiracy boards, surveillance images, maps marked with locations and dates. And in the center of it all, Eliza saw her own face staring back at her. Dozens of photographs. Her leaving work. Her at the grocery store. Her at the library. Some taken from a distance. Others close enough to see the exhaustion in her eyes. What the hell is this? Her voice cracked. Luca's work. Massimo moved to the board and studied it like he was seeing it for the first time. He spent 3 months building this, trying to understand why you mattered. Eliza stepped closer. One photograph showed her father, younger, smiling, standing in front of an office building. The caption beneath read Mercer and Associates, 2009. Another showed a newspaper clipping about a car accident. Local accountant dies in highway crash. This is insane. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. You had your brother stalking me for months. You brought me to your house. You put a gun in my hands, and now you expect me to... I didn't know about this until tonight. Massimo's voice was cold. Luca went rogue, started investigating something without telling me. By the time I realized what he was doing, he was already gone. Then why am I still here? Why didn't you just leave me at the hospital? Because the moment I saw this board, I knew you were the center of something bigger than a missing brother. He pulled down one of the photographs. A man in an expensive suit standing outside what looked like a private club. Recognize him? Eliza studied the image. The man was in his 50s, silver hair, cold eyes. No, Victor Draven. He's a broker. Connects people who need things with people who can provide them. Weapons, information, bodies, whatever the market demands. Massimo's jaw tightened. 3 days ago, Luca met with him. Whatever they discussed, it got my brother kidnapped and turned you into the most valuable target in Blackwater City. I don't know this man. Maybe not. But he knows you. Massimo pulled down another photograph. This one showed Victor Draven standing with a woman Eliza didn't recognize. That's Katerina Volkov. She runs the Russian syndicates operations in North America. Her men just attacked my estate. Eliza's stomach dropped. Why? That's what we're going to find out. Massimo moved to the table and opened a laptop. The screen glowed to life, showing encrypted files and digital records. Luca was trying to trace a financial trail, offshore accounts, shell corporations, money moving through systems designed to be invisible. I don't know anything about offshore accounts. Your father did. Massimo clicked through files. According to Luca's research, your father worked for Gideon Mercer from 2005 to 2011. During that time, Mercer's firm handled financial arrangements for some of the most dangerous organizations on the East Coast. The DeLuca family, the Volkov Syndicate, the Chicago outfit, everyone with money they needed to hide. Eliza's head spun. My dad was just an accountant. Your dad was a forensic accountant who knew how to follow money trails no one else could see. Massimo looked up from the laptop. And in 2011, he found something big enough that he faked his own death to disappear. That's impossible. I saw his body. I went to his funeral. You saw a body. Massimo pulled up a document on the screen. Luca obtained the autopsy report. The man buried in your father's grave was a John Doe pulled from the river 3 days before the supposed car accident. Similar age, similar build, burned badly enough that visual identification was impossible. Eliza's legs gave out. She collapsed into one of the chairs, her ribs screaming. No, that's not... He's dead. I was 12 years old. I watched them lower him into the ground. I know. Massimo's voice softened fractionally. And I know what it's like to realize everything you believed was a lie. She looked up at him. If he's alive, where is he? Hiding. Probably somewhere far from here. Living under a new identity. Watching you from a distance to make sure you're safe. Massimo closed the laptop. But something changed. Someone figured out the connection between you and the missing money. That's why Mercer contacted you about the trust fund. It was bait. Bait for what? To flush your father out of hiding. If he's been watching you all these years, he'll come running the moment you're in real danger. Massimo's expression hardened, which means every organization looking for those offshore accounts is now looking for you. Not to kill you, to use you. Eliza pressed her hands against her face. The pain in her ribs was nothing compared to the feeling that her entire life had been torn apart and reassembled wrong. I can't do this. I'm just trying to get through nursing school. I work doubles at a diner. I don't know anything about crime families or offshore accounts or... Then you're going to learn fast. Massimo moved closer. Because in about 6 hours, the sun's going to rise, and every syndicate between here and Chicago is going to start looking for you. The only reason you're alive right now is because they think you know something. The moment they realize you don't, they'll kill me. No, they'll torture you until you give them something useful. Then they'll kill you. He pulled out his phone. But if we move fast, we can use their greed against them. How? By finding your father before they do. Massimo started typing. Luca left notes, encrypted files, locations he was tracking. If we follow his research, we might be able to... His phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed. I need to take this. He walked to the far side of the warehouse. Eliza watched him talk in low, rapid Italian. Whatever he was hearing, he didn't like it. His free hand clenched into a fist. His jaw worked like he was grinding his teeth. When he returned, his face was a mask. What happened? Eliza asked. They found my brother. His voice was completely flat. He's alive. For now. That's good news, right? They're using him as leverage. They want to trade. Massimo's eyes were black pits. Luca for you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Eliza's throat went dry. What did you tell them? That I'd call them back. He pocketed his phone. We have until noon tomorrow to decide. There's nothing to decide. Eliza stood despite the pain in her ribs. I won't let someone die because of me. This isn't a negotiation. They'll kill both of you the moment the exchange happens. Massimo moved to the conspiracy board and stared at it like it held answers he couldn't see. We need a different play. What if I go to Gideon Mercer, ask him about the trust fund? Maybe he knows how to contact my father. Mercer is part of this. He's been feeding information to the Russians. Massimo pulled down a photograph showing Mercer shaking hands with Katerina Volkov. If you walk into his office, you're walking into a trap. Then what do we do? Massimo was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more dangerous. We go see Victor Draven. The broker? You said he's connected to all of this. He is, which means he knows more than he's telling. Massimo checked his weapon and holstered it. Draven operates out of a private club downtown, very exclusive, very secure. He meets with clients there every night between midnight and 3 a.m. Eliza checked her phone. It was almost 1 in the morning. You want to walk into a place where everyone wants me dead and just ask him questions? No. I want to walk in there and make him understand that keeping secrets is more dangerous than telling the truth. Massimo pulled a different gun from a hidden compartment in the wall and handed it to her. You know how to use this now? She took the weapon with numb fingers. Point and pull the trigger. Good enough. He moved toward the warehouse entrance. We have 2 hours before sunrise. Let's see how much we can learn before the city wakes up. The club was called Elysium, and it looked like a church that had sold its soul for profit. Gothic architecture. Stained glass windows that probably cost more than Eliza's entire education. A doorman in a suit that fit like armor. Massimo walked straight up to the entrance like he owned the building. The doorman's expression shifted from professional courtesy to genuine fear in the space of a heartbeat. Mr. DeLuca, we weren't expecting... I don't care. Massimo pushed past him. Where's Draven? 3rd floor, private lounge, but he's with clients. Massimo was already inside. Eliza followed, acutely aware of the weight of the gun tucked into her jacket pocket. The interior of Elysium was all dark wood and low lighting. Jazz music drifted from hidden speakers. Well-dressed people sat in leather booths, conducting conversations in voices too quiet to overhear. Everyone stopped talking the moment Massimo entered. He ignored them and headed for the stairs. Eliza stayed close, her heart hammering. They climbed to the 3rd floor, where a different kind of atmosphere prevailed. Quieter, more exclusive. Guards stationed at regular intervals. One of them stepped forward to intercept Massimo. He was built like a wall and had the dead eyes of a professional killer. Private floor, Mr. DeLuca. No guests without... Massimo hit him, one precise strike to the throat. The guard dropped, gasping. The other guards reached for their weapons, but Massimo already had his gun out. Anyone else want to make this difficult? They backed down. Smart men who knew when a fight wasn't worth the cost. Massimo walked down the hallway to a set of double doors at the end. He kicked them open without knocking. The room beyond was a private lounge. Leather furniture. A bar stocked with bottles that probably cost thousands of dollars each. And sitting in the center of it all, looking entirely unsurprised, was Victor Draven. He was older than his photographs suggested. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than Eliza made in a year. He held a glass of amber liquid and smiled like Massimo had just told an amusing joke. Massimo DeLuca, I was wondering when you'd show up. His voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that could sell anything to anyone. And you brought the girl. How convenient. 2 other men sat on the couches flanking Draven. They stood when Massimo entered, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Sit down, Draven said mildly. Let's keep this civilized. Where's my brother? Massimo's gun didn't waver. Safe. For the moment. Draven took a sip of his drink. Though I imagine his situation is rather uncomfortable. Katerina has a flair for the dramatic. You brokered the deal. I facilitate connections. What people do with those connections is their business. Draven's eyes shifted to Eliza. Hello, Miss Vale. You've caused quite a commotion in our little world. Eliza's mouth was dry. I didn't ask for any of this. No one ever does. Draven gestured to the empty chairs. Please, sit. Let's discuss this like civilized people. We're not civilized, Massimo said. We're the people you call when civilization fails. Draven's smile widened. True. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy good scotch while we negotiate. He poured 2 more glasses without waiting for an answer. The question isn't whether you're going to trade Miss Vale for your brother. The question is what you're willing to pay to keep them both alive. I'm not trading anyone. Then your brother dies, and Miss Vale becomes Katerina's property. She'll spend the next 6 months in a very unpleasant facility while very unpleasant people try to extract information she doesn't have. Draven's voice remained pleasant. Or we can make a different arrangement. Massimo moved closer. What kind of arrangement? The kind where everyone gets what they want. Katerina gets access to the offshore accounts. You get your brother back. Miss Vale gets to live. Draven set down his glass. All you need to do is help us find her father. I don't know where he is, Eliza said, but you will. Draven pulled out a phone and showed her an image. This is a location tracker embedded in the lining of a coat your father gave you when you were 11 years old. You still have it, don't you, in your apartment closet? Eliza's blood went cold. She did have that coat. Her father's old winter coat that she had kept all these years because it smelled like him and reminded her of a time when she felt safe. He's been tracking you, Draven continued, watching from a distance, waiting for the moment he could safely make contact. He swiped to another image. Surveillance footage of a man standing across the street from Lucky's diner. The image was grainy, but Eliza recognized the posture, the way he held his shoulders. Her father. Alive. He's been in Blackwater City for the last 2 weeks, Draven said, staying close because he knows something's wrong. All we need to do is set the right trap, and he'll come running. No. Eliza's voice shook. I won't be used as bait. You already are bait, Miss Vale. The only question is whether you cooperate and live, or resist and die screaming. Draven's pleasant mask slipped fractionally. I'm trying to offer you a third option. Massimo raised his weapon and pointed it directly at Draven's forehead. Here's a fourth option. You tell me everything you know about the offshore accounts, about Luca, and about who's pulling your strings, and in exchange, I let you live long enough to regret this conversation. The 2 men flanking Draven drew their weapons. The room became a Mexican standoff, 3 guns pointed at Massimo, 1 pointed at Draven, and Eliza caught in the middle with her hand on the weapon in her pocket. This won't end well for you, Draven said calmly. Kill me, and Katerina will assume you're working against her. She'll execute Luca and send every asset she has after Miss Vale. Then I'll kill them all. You're good, Massimo, but you're not that good. Draven finished his scotch. The Volkov syndicate has been building this operation for 15 years. They're not going to walk away because one overprotective crime boss wants to save a waitress. Watch me. The door behind them burst open. 4 more guards entered, weapons drawn. Massimo was outnumbered 8-1. Draven smiled. As I said, not that good. Eliza's hand tightened on the gun in her pocket. Her finger found the trigger. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Something he had told her when she was 7 years old, practicing addition at the kitchen table. Sometimes, Eliza, the only way to solve a problem is to change the equation entirely. She pulled the gun from her pocket and fired. Not at Draven. Not at his guards. At the massive chandelier hanging from the ceiling directly above them. The crystal fixture shattered. Glass rained down like deadly snow. Everyone dove for cover. Massimo used the distraction to grab Eliza and pull her toward the window. Hold on! He fired 3 shots at the glass. It spiderwebbed, cracked. We're 3 stories up. I know. He wrapped his arm around her waist. Trust me. Then he crashed through the window, pulling her with him into the night. They fell through darkness and broken glass. Eliza's scream died in her throat as they hit something that gave way beneath them, an awning over the club's side entrance. The fabric tore. They kept falling. They hit a dumpster in the alley below. The impact drove the air from Eliza's lungs. Pain exploded through her already broken ribs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Massimo rolled off the dumpster and landed on his feet like a cat. He pulled Eliza down after him. Move! Gunfire erupted from the window above. Bullets punched into the brick wall beside them. Massimo dragged her down the alley toward a motorcycle parked in the shadows. Get on! Eliza climbed onto the bike behind him. He kicked it to life and accelerated hard. They screamed out of the alley and onto the street, weaving through sparse traffic with guards pouring out of Elysium's entrance behind them. They drove for 20 minutes, taking random turns and doubling back, until Massimo was satisfied they weren't being followed. Finally, he pulled into an underground parking garage and killed the engine. Eliza climbed off the bike and immediately doubled over, vomiting onto the concrete. Her ribs felt like they were on fire. Blood dripped from dozens of small cuts where the glass had caught her. Massimo steadied her. Breathe, slow. You threw us out a window. Better than getting shot in a room with no exits. He checked his phone. We have maybe 2 hours before they organize a proper hunt. We need to disappear, completely. Where? He was quiet for a moment, then, I know a place. Somewhere they won't think to look. But it means leaving the city, leaving everything. Eliza straightened despite the pain. I don't have anything to leave. Then let's go. They took the motorcycle north, leaving Blackwater City's lights behind. The highway stretched into darkness. Eliza held on to Massimo's waist and tried not to think about the fact that everything she knew, her apartment, her job, her carefully constructed life, was gone now. 2 hours later, they arrived at a lake hidden deep in the woods. A small cabin sat on the shore, isolated and dark. Massimo parked the motorcycle and led her inside. The cabin was sparse. One room, a fireplace, a bed, no electricity, no running water. My mother used to bring me here, Massimo said quietly. When things got bad at home. It's off every grid, no records, no trail. Eliza sank onto the bed. Her entire body hurt. What do we do now? Massimo moved to the fireplace and started building a fire. We figure out what your father found. We find him before they do, and we end this before anyone else dies. And your brother? His hands stilled. Luca made his choice when he started investigating this without telling me. Now he has to live with the consequences. You're just going to abandon him? I'm choosing who I can actually save. Massimo looked at her across the dim cabin. That's you, whether you like it or not. The fire caught. Orange light filled the small space. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming on the cabin's roof. They were alone in the wilderness, hunted by organizations with resources neither of them could match. And somewhere in Blackwater City, Eliza's father was watching. Waiting. Preparing to make a move that would either save them all or destroy everything. Massimo sat on the floor near the fire, checking his weapons. Eliza watched him work in silence. The cold, ruthless crime boss who had dragged her into this nightmare. The man who had just chosen her life over his own brother's. Why me? She finally asked. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why risk everything for someone you just met? Massimo didn't look up from his work. Because the moment I saw Luca's conspiracy board, I knew you were the key to something bigger than family loyalty, bigger than the DeLuca name. He set down the weapon and met her eyes. And because in 24 hours you've proven you're stronger than half the men who work for me. I'm terrified. Good. Terrified people stay alive. He stood and moved to the window, staring out at the dark lake. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start hunting for answers. But Eliza knew sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept cycling through impossible truths. Her father alive. Her entire childhood built on lies. A conspiracy that reached back 15 years and involved more money than she could imagine. And Massimo DeLuca, the dangerous stranger who had become the only person standing between her and a bullet. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain and the crackling fire. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard Massimo moving around, checking perimeters, making calls in voices too quiet to overhear. Hours passed. The rain intensified, and just before dawn, Eliza finally fell into an exhausted sleep, filled with nightmares of falling through broken windows and graves that opened to reveal empty coffins. When she woke, gray morning light filtered through the cabin's dirty windows. Massimo sat at the small table, his laptop open, surrounded by papers covered in his handwriting. He looked up when she stirred. Your father's been communicating with someone. Encrypted emails routed through multiple servers. Luca traced them back to a server in Baltimore. Eliza sat up slowly. Baltimore? Mercer has an office there. Secondary location he uses for clients who want extra privacy. Massimo turned the laptop so she could see. According to these emails, your father has been trying to negotiate safe passage for you. He knows you're in danger. How do you know it's really him? Because the encryption key matches one Luca found in your old apartment building's maintenance records. Your father hid it there 12 years ago, probably as a backup, in case he ever needed to prove his identity to you. Eliza's chest tightened. What's he saying in the emails?
He's offering Mercer half the offshore accounts in exchange for your safety. Full immunity, new identity. Relocation to somewhere the syndicates can't reach. Massimo's expression was unreadable. Mercer agreed. The meeting is set for tomorrow night in Baltimore. It's a trap. Obviously, Massimo closed the laptop. But it's also our only play. We crash the meeting. Force Mercer and your father into the same room. Get answers before the Russians figure out where we are. And Luca? If we can expose Mercer's involvement with the Volkov syndicate, Katerina loses her leverage. She'll have to trade Luca for access to the accounts. His jaw tightened. It's not guaranteed, but it's better than walking into a straight exchange. Eliza stood and moved to the window. The lake was gray under overcast skies. If we do this and it goes wrong, then we die. But at least we die trying to fix this instead of hiding in the woods and waiting for them to find us. She turned to look at him. You really think we can win? No. Massimo's honesty was brutal. But I think we can survive long enough to hurt them badly. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for. Outside, a branch snapped. Massimo's hand moved to his weapon instantly. He held up one finger, quiet, and moved to the window with practiced silence. Another sound, footsteps crunching through the underbrush. How many? Eliza whispered. Can't tell. Massimo moved to the door and peered through a crack in the wood. Could be animals. Could be... The cabin's front window exploded inward in a spray of glass and bullets. Eliza dropped to the floor. Massimo returned fire through the shattered opening, his face a mask of controlled rage. Out the back! He grabbed his laptop and shoved it into a bag. Go! Eliza scrambled toward the rear of the cabin. The back door hung crooked on old hinges. She kicked it open and stumbled into the woods behind the cabin. More gunfire. The sound of splintering wood. Men shouting in Russian. Massimo emerged from the cabin, firing backward as he ran. They crashed through the forest, branches tearing at their clothes and skin. Behind them, their pursuers gave chase. The lake appeared ahead through the trees. A small dock extended into the water, and tied to that dock, a boat. Old. Probably didn't run, but it was their only option. They ran for the dock. Massimo hit the boat first, scrambling into it and reaching for the engine. He pulled the starter cord once, twice. Nothing. The Russians burst from the tree line. Come on! Massimo pulled the cord again. The engine sputtered, died. Bullets chewed into the dock. Eliza threw herself into the boat as Massimo pulled the cord one more time. The engine roared to life. They pulled away from the dock as their pursuers reached the water's edge. Bullets stitched across the lake's surface, coming closer, closer. Then they were out of range, the small boat cutting through the gray water toward the far shore. Eliza looked back at the cabin. Smoke rose from its windows. Everything they had left behind was burning. Massimo steered the boat toward a distant inlet. His expression was hard, cold, defeated. They found us, Eliza said. They'll always find us. That's how this works. He didn't look at her. We need to move faster. Baltimore can't wait. We barely escaped with our lives. Then we'll keep barely escaping until we don't. Massimo's voice was hollow. That's all we have left. The boat cut through the water. Behind them, the cabin burned. And somewhere ahead, in Baltimore, Eliza's father was walking into a trap that would either end this nightmare or make it infinitely worse. The boat's engine died 2 miles from shore. Massimo pulled the starter cord 3 times before giving up. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Gray water stretched in every direction. No other boats, no witnesses. Just the 2 of them drifting in a stolen piece of junk while smoke still rose from the burning cabin behind them. We'll have to row. Massimo found 2 oars wedged beneath the seats. He handed one to Eliza. Start paddling. Her arm screamed in protest, but she did it anyway. They rowed in grim silence toward the far shore, where dense forest met the waterline. Every stroke sent pain radiating through her broken ribs. Sweat mixed with lake water and blood from the cuts covering her arms. By the time they reached land, her hands were blistered and raw. Massimo pulled the boat onto a narrow strip of rocky beach and immediately started walking into the woods without waiting for her. Where are we going? Eliza's voice came out hoarse. Highway's about 3 miles east. We'll steal a car and drive to Baltimore.
He didn't slow down, didn't look back. Keep moving. They walked for an hour through thick undergrowth and mud. Eliza's diner uniform was shredded. Her shoes were soaked through. Everything hurt, but she kept walking because the alternative was dying in these woods.
When they finally reached the highway, Massimo scanned the sparse traffic with predatory focus. A rest stop sat a quarter-mile down the road. He pointed toward it. There. We find something with Maryland plates and take it. They stayed in the tree line until they reached the rest stop parking lot. A dozen vehicles scattered across the asphalt. Families, truckers, people living normal lives who had no idea two fugitives were about to steal their transportation. Massimo chose a dark sedan with tinted windows. He pulled a slim tool from his pocket and had the door open in under 30 seconds. Another 30 seconds, and the engine was running. Get in. Eliza climbed into the passenger seat. The interior smelled like fast food and stale coffee. A child's toy was wedged between the seats. She tried not to think about the family they were stealing from. Massimo pulled out of the rest stop and merged onto the highway heading south. They drove in silence for the first hour. Then Eliza's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Unknown number, again. Don't answer it, Massimo said. She answered it anyway, put it on speaker. A man's voice, rough, exhausted, familiar in a way that made her chest ache. Eliza. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. It's me, sweetheart. It's your dad. The phone slipped from her fingers. Massimo caught it before it hit the floor, his jaw tight. Who is this really? His voice was cold steel. A bitter laugh came through the speaker. You must be the DeLuca boy dragging my daughter through hell. I've been watching the news. Your estate burned down. Quite a mess. If you're her father, prove it. Eliza has a birthmark on her left shoulder blade shaped like a crescent moon. She broke her arm falling off a swing set when she was 7. And when she was 9, I took her to the aquarium in the city, and she cried because she thought the sharks looked lonely. The voice cracked. That enough proof? Or do you want her social security number too? Eliza grabbed the phone back. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Where are you? Baltimore. Where Mercer thinks I'll show up tonight like a lamb to slaughter. A pause. But you're already heading here, aren't you, with the DeLuca boy? Trying to be heroes. Someone has to stop this. Someone did. 15 years ago, I stopped it by disappearing. His voice hardened. And now you've undone everything I sacrificed by getting tangled up with these people. I didn't ask for this. No, you didn't. But that doesn't change reality. He exhaled slowly. Listen to me very carefully, Eliza. Gideon Mercer is not your ally. He's been working with the Volkov syndicate since the beginning. That meeting tonight, it's designed to trap all 3 of us in the same room so Katerina can clean up loose ends. Then why did you agree to it? Because I'm tired of running, and because I need to look you in the eye and apologize for what I did to you. His voice broke. I've watched you struggle for 15 years, watched you work yourself to exhaustion, watched you survive things that would have destroyed most people. And I couldn't do anything to help because the moment I made contact, I'd paint a target on your back. Tears burned Eliza's eyes. You should have told me you were alive. I know. And I'll spend whatever time I have left regretting that choice. A sound in the background. Footsteps. I have to go. They're moving the meeting location. New address. I'm texting it to you now. The phone buzzed with an incoming message. An address in Baltimore's industrial district. Dad, don't go. It's a trap. Everything's a trap, sweetheart. The question is whether you spring it or let it spring you. Another pause. The DeLuca boy, listening to this conversation. You keep my daughter alive, you understand me? Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. She's still breathing, isn't she? Massimo's voice was flat. Then make sure she stays that way. Because if she dies, the information I've been holding disappears with me. And every organization looking for those offshore accounts will tear this country apart trying to find it. The line went dead. Eliza stared at the phone. Her father, alive, watching her, suffering alongside her from a distance while she thought he was buried in the ground. He's right about Mercer, Massimo said quietly. I've known it since we left the club. Draven and Mercer are both feeding information to Katerina. They've been playing both sides for years. Then why are we still going to Baltimore? Because your father has the access codes, and Katerina has my brother, and somewhere in that meeting, all the pieces come together. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. We crash it, force everyone into the open, and hope the chaos gives us enough time to extract what we need. That's not a plan. That's suicide. You have a better idea? She didn't. They drove through the afternoon and into evening, the sun set behind them in violent shades of orange and red. By the time they reached Baltimore, darkness had fallen and the city lights reflected off the harbor like scattered diamonds. The address her father sent led them to an abandoned shipyard on the industrial waterfront. Rusted cranes loomed against the night sky. Empty warehouses stretched in every direction, the kind of place where bodies got dumped and nobody asked questions. Massimo parked the stolen sedan 3 blocks away. He checked his weapons with mechanical efficiency. 2 pistols, extra magazines, a knife strapped to his ankle. "You stay in the car," he said. "No, this isn't a debate." "You're right, it's not." Eliza pulled out the gun he'd given her at the cabin. "My father's in there. I'm not sitting in a car while you walk into an ambush." Massimo studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod once. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." They approached the shipyard on foot, moving through shadows between buildings. The address led to a warehouse near the water's edge. Light spilled from broken windows on the second floor. Voices carried on the night air. Massimo held up his hand. "Wait." He moved to a side entrance and tested the door. Unlocked. He pushed it open slowly, weapon raised. The interior was a maze of shipping containers and old machinery. Stairs led to the second floor where the voices were coming from. They climbed in silence. Each step felt like a countdown to something inevitable and terrible. At the top of the stairs, a hallway stretched toward a room with an open door. Light. Shadows moving inside. Massimo gestured for Eliza to stay back, but she ignored him and moved forward anyway. They reached the doorway together. Inside, the scene was almost civilized. A table surrounded by chairs. Gideon Mercer sat at one end, silver-haired and immaculate in his expensive suit. Across from him sat a man Eliza barely recognized. Her father, older, grayer, worn down by 15 years of hiding, but alive. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she appeared in the doorway, and something broke in his expression. "Eliza, nobody move." Katerina Volkov stepped from the shadows behind Mercer. She held a gun pointed at Eliza's father's head. How predictable. The daughter shows up to save Daddy, and she brings the lovesick gangster with her. Massimo's weapon was already trained on Katerina. "Where's my brother?" "Safe. For now." Katerina's smile was cold. "Though his condition deteriorates by the hour, hunger, dehydration, the usual, let him go. After we conclude our business." Katerina gestured with her free hand. "Please, come in. We've been waiting for you." Massimo and Eliza entered the room slowly. 2 of Katerina's men appeared from flanking positions, weapons drawn. Massimo's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower his gun. "Everyone's here," Mercer said pleasantly. "How wonderful. We can finally resolve this unfortunate situation." "There's nothing to resolve, say." Eliza's father's voice was rough. "I give you the access codes. You let my daughter and the DeLuca brothers leave. Everyone gets what they want." "Not quite." Katerina moved closer to him. "You see, we've discovered something interesting during our investigation. Those offshore accounts you've been hiding, they don't contain what everyone thinks they contain." Eliza's father went very still. 15 years ago, you didn't just steal access codes," Katerina continued. "You stole the actual money, moved it, redistributed it through so many shell corporations and dummy accounts that tracing it became impossible." She leaned down, her face inches from his. "The accounts everyone's been fighting over? They're empty. Have been for a decade." The room went silent. "That's impossible," Mercer said. His composure cracked fractionally. "I've been tracking those accounts. The balances are fabricated." Katerina straightened. "Phantom numbers in a ledger that hasn't been real since 2013. Your father's quite the artist, Miss Vale. He made the entire criminal underworld believe billions of dollars were sitting untouched, waiting to be claimed, when in reality, he'd already liquidated everything,
and hidden it somewhere else entirely. Eliza looked at her father. Is that true? He didn't answer. Where's the real money? Massimo's voice was dangerously quiet.
That's what we're going to find out. Caterina nodded to her men. They moved forward and grabbed Eliza, slamming her into a chair. Another man did the same to Massimo, disarming him efficiently. Don't touch her! Eliza's father lunged forward, but Caterina pressed her gun against his temple. Sit. Down. He sat.
Mercer stood and walked to the window, staring out at the dark harbor. This is quite the revelation. I've spent 15 years managing a ghost. The Chicago outfit, the DeLuca family, the Bratva. Every major organization on the East Coast has been searching for money that no longer exists in those accounts. Which means you've been lying to all of them, Massimo said. How long until they figure that out? Mercer turned back. That's why we need the truth. Tonight. Before anyone else realizes they've been chasing shadows. Caterina pressed the gun harder against Eliza's father's head. Where is the real money? Distributed. His voice was hollow. 100 different accounts across 30 countries. Donations to charities, anonymous gifts to struggling families. I spent 15 years giving it all away. The room erupted. You what? Mercer's face went white. You destroyed it? Caterina's composure finally shattered. Billions of dollars. Blood money. Eliza's father looked at his daughter. I couldn't keep it, couldn't let it fund more violence, so I made sure it went to people who actually needed it. Noble. Caterina's voice dripped venom. And incredibly stupid. She pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Eliza's father jerked backward, blood spraying from his shoulder. He collapsed to the floor, gasping. Dad! Eliza tried to stand, but one of Caterina's men shoved her back down. That was a warning. Caterina reloaded calmly. The next one goes through his skull unless you give me something useful. Account numbers, transfer records, anything I can use to recover what you stole. There's nothing to recover. Blood pooled beneath him. It's gone. All of it. Caterina aimed at his head. Wait! Mercer stepped forward. If he's telling the truth, killing him serves no purpose. We need to pivot. Salvage what we can from this disaster. And what exactly can we salvage? Caterina's finger remained on the trigger. Mercer's expression shifted, calculated. We have the daughter, and we have leverage over the DeLuca family. That's not nothing. Meaning? Meaning we stage an accident. Father and daughter die in a tragic confrontation. The DeLuca boy witnesses it and returns home traumatized but alive. We feed a story to the syndicates that the money was lost in a banking collapse 15 years ago. Everyone walks away disappointed, but with no one left to blame. Massimo's voice cut through the room like a blade. You're describing a cover-up. I'm describing survival. Mercer moved closer to Caterina. If the truth gets out that the money is gone, every organization involved will turn on each other. The resulting war will destroy half the criminal infrastructure on the East Coast. Is that what you want? Caterina lowered her weapon fractionally. And my organization accepts this loss? Your organization accepts that sometimes assets depreciate beyond recovery. Mercer gestured to Eliza's father, bleeding on the floor. Cut your losses. Move on to the next opportunity. What about Luca? Massimo's voice was ice. Collateral damage. Mercer didn't even look at him. You'll receive his body with our condolences. A tragic casualty of an investigation that went nowhere. Something in Massimo's expression changed. The cold businessman vanished. What replaced it was pure, distilled violence. He moved faster than anyone anticipated. His chair shattered as he stood, one broken leg becoming a weapon. He drove it into the throat of the guard nearest him. The man dropped, choking. Massimo grabbed the falling guard's weapon and fired twice. Both of Caterina's other men went down. He pivoted toward Caterina herself, but she was already moving, using Mercer as a human shield. Shoot me and you hit him, she shouted. I don't care. Massimo's voice was empty. He fired anyway. The bullet punched through Mercer's shoulder and caught Caterina in the chest. Both of them collapsed. Mercer screamed. Caterina didn't make a sound. Eliza broke free from her chair and ran to her father, blood soaked through his shirt. His breathing was shallow. Dad? Dad, stay with me. His eyes focused on her face. I'm sorry, sweetheart, for everything. Don't talk. We'll get you help. There's no help coming. His hand found hers. Listen, the charity accounts. I kept records. Safe deposit box. Baltimore First National, box 847. Keys in my wallet. I don't care about the money. It's not about money anymore. He coughed. Blood flecked his lips. It's proof. Proof of where it all went, who benefited. Use it to protect yourself. Massimo appeared above them. We need to move, now. Police will be here in minutes. He's bleeding out. Then he stays. Massimo grabbed Eliza's arm. We don't. I'm not leaving him. He's already gone. Massimo's voice was brutal, but not unkind. Look at him. Eliza looked. Her father's eyes were glazing. His chest barely moved. The pool of blood beneath him had stopped spreading because his heart was failing. Go, her father whispered. Live. That's all I ever wanted for you. His hand went limp in hers. Eliza felt something inside her break. Not her heart. Something deeper. The last fragile belief that people could be saved if you just tried hard enough. Massimo pulled her to her feet. She didn't resist. Couldn't resist. She was hollow. They ran. Down the stairs. Through the warehouse. Out into the night where sirens wailed in the distance. Massimo pulled her toward the water's edge where a small boat was tied to a rotting dock. Get in. She got in. They pulled away from the shipyard as police lights appeared on the access road. The boat cut through black water toward the far side of the harbor. Behind them, the warehouse lit up with flashlights and shouted orders. They abandoned the boat in a commercial marina and stole another car. Massimo drove north without speaking. Eliza stared out the window at nothing. Hours passed. The sun rose over a landscape she didn't recognize. Trees gave way to farmland, gave way to industrial sprawl. Finally, Massimo pulled into an abandoned gas station and killed the engine. I need you to focus, he said quietly. I need you to tell me exactly what your father said about the safe deposit box. Baltimore First National, box 847. Key location? His wallet, which is with his body, which is in police custody by now. Massimo's jaw worked. We'll have to break into the bank. Why? Eliza's voice was dead. The money's gone. He gave it all away. There's nothing left. There's proof. Records showing where it went. That proof is the only leverage we have left. He looked at her. Your father died protecting those records. Don't let that be for nothing. Everything's for nothing. Don't you see that? She finally turned to face him. The money's gone. Your brother's dead or will be soon. My father's dead. Katerina's dead. This entire nightmare was built on a lie that everyone believed because it was easier than facing the truth. Then we use that truth as a weapon. Against who? Mercer's wounded but not dead. The Volkov syndicate will just send someone else. There's no winning this. Massimo grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. Your father spent 15 years making sure that money helped people instead of destroying them. That's not nothing. That's everything. And if we can prove it, we can buy ourselves time to actually survive this. I don't want to survive this. I want to go back to my life. Your life is gone. His voice softened. I'm sorry. But the moment those men attacked you in that park, your old life ended. Now you have to decide what your new life looks like. Eliza pulled away from him. I killed someone. At the cabin. I shot that woman. Katerina. I pulled a trigger and ended someone's life. Her hand shook. I can still feel the recoil. Can still see her fall. Good. That means you're not broken yet. Massimo opened his door. Stay here. I need to make some calls. He walked to the edge of the gas station lot and pulled out his phone. Eliza watched him pace and gesture and argue with people she couldn't hear. The exhaustion was so profound it felt like drowning. When Massimo returned, his expression was grim. Luca's alive. Katerina's second-in-command confirmed it. They're willing to trade him for the bank records. That's not a trade. That's them cleaning up. I know. Massimo started the engine. But it's the only play we have left. We get those records, we trade them for my brother, and then we disappear before anyone realizes we're still breathing. And if they kill us anyway, then we die trying. He pulled out of the gas station, which is better than dying hiding. They drove to Baltimore in tense silence. The bank was a stone building in the financial district, imposing, secure, designed to keep people like them out.
How are we supposed to break into a bank in broad daylight? Eliza asked. We're not breaking in. Massimo pulled into a parking garage across the street. We're walking in through the front door. They'll ask for ID, the key. Verification. I know. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a leather bag. Inside were documents. Multiple IDs, credit cards. I had these made years ago. Emergency identities in case the DeLuca name became a liability. He handed her an ID. The photograph was close enough to pass. The name read Sarah Mitchell. You're a financial consultant from New York, Massimo said. I'm your attorney. We're accessing your late father's safe deposit box to retrieve estate documents. Keep your answers short. Let me do most of the talking. This won't work. It will if you commit to it. He met her eyes. Right now you're not Eliza Vale. You're Sarah Mitchell, and Sarah Mitchell has never seen a dead body or fired a gun or watched her father bleed out on a warehouse floor. She's just a consultant doing paperwork. Can you be here for 20 minutes? Eliza took the ID, stared at the name, Sarah Mitchell. A woman who had never been hunted, never been betrayed, never been broken. Yeah, she said quietly. I can be her. They walked into the bank at 10 in the morning. The interior was all marble and vaulted ceilings and the quiet hush of serious money. A receptionist greeted them with professional warmth. Good morning. How can we help you today? Safe deposit box access. Massimo's entire demeanor had changed. He was polished, refined, nothing like the dangerous man who had thrown her out a window 2 nights ago. Box 847 under the name Richard Mitchell. The receptionist checked her computer. I'll need to see identification and the key. Of course. Massimo produced his attorney ID and gestured to Eliza. My client has the key. Eliza's mind went blank. She didn't have the key. The key was in her father's wallet, in police custody. Her voice faltered. I think I left it in the car. You think? The receptionist's professional warmth cooled slightly. I'm sorry, it's been a difficult week. My father just passed and I'm still processing. Her voice broke authentically because it wasn't Sarah Mitchell talking anymore. It was Eliza. Can you give me a moment to check? The receptionist's expression softened. Take your time. Massimo guided Eliza outside. Once they were in the parking garage, his composure cracked. We need that key. I know. The police have it, which means we either break into evidence lockup or we tell the bank we lost it and pay for the box to be drilled, Eliza interrupted. That's an option, right? It takes time, paperwork, verification of ownership. We don't have time. Eliza's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it without thinking. Miss Vale, Victor Draven's smooth voice. You've had quite a morning. How did you get this number? I get every number eventually. A pause. I'm calling to offer you a deal. The key to box 847 in exchange for 10% of whatever's inside. The key's in police custody. Not anymore. I acquired it 20 minutes ago from a very cooperative evidence clerk. Draven sounded amused. I also know you're standing outside Baltimore First National trying to figure out your next move. So here's my proposal. I give you the key. You retrieve the records. And we split them. You keep enough to buy your freedom. I keep enough to cover my considerable losses in this debacle. Why would you help us? Because Mercer is wounded and weak. Because Katerina is dead and her organization is fracturing. Because the power structure is shifting and I'd rather align with the people who survived than the people who didn't. He paused. You have 5 minutes to decide. After that, I sell the key to whoever offers the most money. Massimo grabbed the phone. Where are you? Coffee shop, 1 block east of the bank. You'll see me. The line went dead. Massimo and Eliza ran the block in less than 3 minutes. The coffee shop was crowded with morning customers. Victor Draven sat at a corner table, immaculate in another perfect suit, drinking espresso like he didn't have a care in the world. They sat across from him. Show me the key, Massimo said. Draven placed it on the table. Small, brass. The number 847 engraved on its head. How do I know you won't just take the records after we retrieve them? Eliza asked. You don't. That's what makes this interesting. Draven finished his espresso. But consider my position. If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. If I wanted the records for myself, I'd have broken into that box myself. What I want is a new arrangement, one where we all benefit from this mess instead of continuing to tear each other apart. 10%, Massimo said. 10% of records proving billions of dollars went to charities and legitimate businesses. Draven smiled. That's leverage worth far more than money. It's proof that the entire criminal underworld has been chasing ghosts. Do you understand how valuable that information is? How many organizations will pay to suppress it? How many governments will pay to publish it? Eliza's hand moved toward the key. What's stopping me from taking this and walking away? Nothing, except the 2 men waiting outside who will follow you to the bank and kill you the moment you exit with those records. Draven's smile never wavered. I'm offering partnership. Take it or leave it. Massimo and Eliza exchanged a look. They didn't have a choice. Didn't have leverage. Didn't have anything except each other, and the faint hope that maybe, somehow, they could survive one more day. Deal, Massimo said. Draven pushed the key across the table. Then let's go collect our insurance policy. They walked back to the bank together. Draven stayed outside while Massimo and Eliza entered with the key. The receptionist smiled when they returned. Found it? Found it. Eliza placed the key on the desk. 10 minutes later, they were in the vault room. A bank employee unlocked box 847 and discreetly left them alone. Massimo opened the metal container. Inside were documents, hundreds of pages, financial records, transfer receipts, a ledger documenting every dollar her father had moved and where it had gone, children's hospitals, homeless shelters, scholarship funds, anonymous donations to families drowning in medical debt, and at the bottom, a handwritten letter addressed to Eliza. She unfolded it with shaking hands. Sweetheart, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry for the life I gave you. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stay dead when staying dead would have kept you safe. I took blood money and tried to make it clean. I don't know if that's possible, but I spent 15 years trying. Every dollar that funded violence became a dollar that funded hope. It won't erase what that money did originally, but maybe it made the world slightly less terrible. The records in this box will make you a target, but they'll also make you powerful. Use them wisely, trust no one, and live the life I couldn't give you. I love you. I always have. Dad. Eliza folded the letter and placed it back in the box. She didn't cry. Couldn't cry. She'd run out of tears somewhere between the burning cabin and watching her father die. They carried the documents out of the vault. Draven was waiting by the entrance, looking pleased. Everything you hoped for? Everything I feared, Eliza said. They walked out together into the bright Baltimore morning. Somewhere in the city, Luca DeLuca was still imprisoned. Somewhere else, Mercer was recovering from his gunshot wound and planning his next move. And somewhere far away, organizations who had spent 15 years chasing phantoms were about to discover the truth. Draven led them to a black SUV parked in a loading zone. My people will make copies. You'll receive digital backups within the hour. After that, we part ways and pretend this alliance never happened. And Luca? Massimo's voice was hollow. Already arranged. He'll be released at the waterfront in 2 hours. Alive, traumatized, but breathing. Draven opened the SUV's door. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Goodwill. Massimo's laugh was bitter. Is that what we're calling this? We're calling it survival. Draven climbed into the vehicle. Which is more than most people get in our world. The SUV pulled away. Massimo and Eliza stood on the sidewalk, holding documents that proved her father had tried to do something good in a life built on terrible things. What now? Eliza asked. Now we collect my brother, and then we figure out how to disappear before everyone realizes we're still a problem. Massimo started walking toward the waterfront. Stay close. This isn't over yet. But Eliza knew the truth. It would never be over. Not really. She had crossed too many lines, seen too much, become something she couldn't uncross or unsee or unbecome. The waitress from Blackwater City was dead, buried in the same grave as her father and the innocent girl she used to be. What walked beside Massimo DeLuca toward the waterfront wasn't Eliza Vale anymore. It was something new, something harder, something that had learned to pull the trigger first and apologize to ghosts later, and that terrified her more than anything else that had happened in the past 3 days. The waterfront smelled like dead fish and diesel fuel. Gray water lapped against rotting pilings, while seagulls screamed overhead. Massimo checked his watch,
for the third time in 5 minutes. He should be here by now. Eliza scanned the industrial docks stretching in both directions. Empty shipping containers stacked like rusted monuments, abandoned warehouses with broken windows, the kind of place where people disappeared and nobody looked too hard for answers. Maybe Draven lied. He didn't lie. Massimo's jaw was tight. Lying would be simpler. This is something worse. A black van appeared at the far end of the dock. It drove slowly, deliberately, like it had all the time in the world. Massimo's hand moved to his weapon. "Stay behind me." The van stopped 50 feet away. The side door slid open. 2 men climbed out, dragging a third between them. Even from a distance, Eliza could see Luca DeLuca was in bad shape. His face was swollen. His clothes were torn. He couldn't stand without support. The men dropped him onto the concrete and climbed back into the van. It pulled away without a word, leaving Luca crumpled on the dock. Massimo ran. Eliza followed. They reached Luca together and Massimo dropped to his knees, checking his brother's pulse, his breathing, the extent of his injuries. "Luca, look at me." Luca's eyes cracked open. One was swollen shut, the other barely focused. "Massimo, I'm here. You're safe now." "Safe?" Luca's laugh came out as a wet cough. Blood flecked his lips. "Nothing's safe, they know. They all know." "Know what?" "About the money, about the girl's father, about everything." Luca grabbed Massimo's jacket with trembling hands. Mercer didn't just work for the Russians. He worked for everyone. Chicago, Philadelphia, the Italians down south. He played every syndicate against each other for 15 years. Massimo's expression darkened. Why? Because he's building something bigger. A network that doesn't answer to family loyalty or territory. Just profit. Luca coughed again. More blood. And now that the offshore accounts are exposed as empty, everyone's turning on each other, blaming, accusing. It's going to be a war, Massimo, not between organizations, between everyone. Then we leave. Get out of the country before it starts. Too late. Luca's grip weakened. Mercer put a contract on both of you. $2 million to whoever brings him your bodies and the bank records. Every hitman, every crew, every desperate soldier looking to make a name. They're all coming. Eliza's stomach dropped. When? Now. Luca's eyes closed. They're already here. The gunshot came from somewhere high and distant. The bullet struck the concrete between Massimo and Eliza, spraying fragments. Massimo grabbed Luca and dragged him behind a shipping container. Eliza dove after them. "Sniper!" Massimo pulled his weapon. "Roof! Southwest!" Another shot. This one closer. The bullet punched through the container's metal wall inches above their heads. "We need to move!" Eliza's pulse hammered in her throat. "I can't carry him and fight." Massimo looked at his brother. Luca had passed out from pain and exhaustion. "You have to help me." They lifted Luca between them and ran in a crouched shuffle toward the nearest warehouse. Bullets tracked their movement, kicking up concrete and sparking off metal. One shot grazed Massimo's shoulder. He grunted but didn't slow. They crashed through a warehouse door and into darkness. Inside, the space was vast and empty, except for scattered debris and old machinery. Dim light filtered through broken windows high above. Massimo lowered Luca against a support column and checked his shoulder. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed bone. Blood soaked his shirt. "How bad?" Eliza asked. "I'll live." He tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped it around the wound. "We need to find a way out that isn't the way we came in." Eliza moved to a window and peered through the grime. The waterfront outside was coming alive, men emerging from vehicles, spreading out with tactical precision, at least a dozen, maybe more. "They're surrounding the building. Then we go up." Massimo pointed to a rusted metal staircase leading to the warehouse's upper levels. "Find high ground. Make them work for it." They lifted Luca again and climbed. Each step sent pain radiating through Eliza's broken ribs. Sweat mixed with blood from the cuts covering her arms. By the time they reached the third-floor catwalk, her legs were shaking. Massimo set Luca down near a wall with a view of the entire warehouse floor. He checked his weapons. One pistol with half a magazine, a knife. That was it. "We're not getting out of this," Eliza said quietly. "Probably not." Massimo's voice was flat. "But we're going to make it expensive for them.
Below, the warehouse doors burst open. Men poured inside, moving with military efficiency. They fanned out, clearing corners, checking shadows. Professional, well-trained. Not the desperate street soldiers Eliza had expected. "Who are they?" she whispered. "Mercer's private contractors." Massimo watched them move. "He's not taking chances." One of the contractors spotted movement on the catwalk and shouted. Weapons raised. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness. Massimo returned fire. 2 shots. One contractor dropped. The others scattered for cover. "Count them," Massimo said. Eliza tried, kept losing track. 10, maybe 12. 13. Luca's voice was weak but conscious. "I counted 13 coming through the door." "Can you shoot?" "Give me a gun and we'll find out." Massimo handed him the backup pistol. Luca checked it with shaking hands. 3 rounds left. "Make them count." The contractors regrouped and advanced. They moved in coordinated pairs, covering each other, using the warehouse's debris for protection. One pair reached the base of the metal staircase. Massimo leaned over the catwalk railing and fired twice. Both contractors went down, but the gunfire pinpointed their position. Bullets tore through the catwalk's metal grating. Eliza pressed herself flat as rounds punched through the floor beneath her. "We need to move." Massimo grabbed her arm. "Now!" They ran along the catwalk toward the far side of the warehouse. Behind them, contractors climbed the stairs. Ahead, the catwalk ended at a door marked Emergency Exit. Massimo kicked it open. Beyond was another warehouse, connected by a narrow bridge suspended 3 stories above an alley. The bridge swayed under their weight as they crossed. Below, more contractors appeared. They raised their weapons. "Go!" Massimo fired downward, forcing them back. "Don't stop!" They reached the second warehouse and slammed the door shut. Massimo dragged a metal shelf across it as a barricade. It wouldn't hold long, but it didn't need to. This warehouse was older, more deteriorated. Holes in the roof let in streams of afternoon sunlight, and in the center of the floor sat something unexpected. A boat, massive, half-finished, sitting on blocks like a beached whale. "My uncle's project." Massimo stared at it. He was building this before he died. Never finished it. Why is it still here? Because nobody wanted to deal with moving it. Massimo moved toward the boat. "But it might give us cover." They climbed onto the deck using a ladder propped against the hull. The boat's interior was a maze of unfinished compartments and exposed framework. Massimo led them deep into the structure, finding a space where they could see the warehouse entrance but remain hidden. "How long until they breach that door?" Eliza asked. 5 minutes, maybe less. Massimo reloaded his weapon with the last magazine. "When they come through, we hit them hard and fast, no hesitation." "There's too many." "I know." He looked at her. "But if we're dying today, we're taking as many of them with us as possible." Luca laughed weakly from where he sat propped against a bulkhead. Always the optimist. "Shut up and conserve your strength." The barricaded door exploded inward. Contractors poured through the opening, spreading out to search the warehouse. They moved more cautiously now. They'd lost men. They knew their targets were dangerous. Massimo waited until 6 contractors were inside before he fired. The confined space of the warehouse magnified the gunshots into thunder. 2 contractors dropped before they realized where the attack came from. The others returned fire, shredding the boat's hull with automatic weapons. Wood splintered. Metal screamed. Eliza pressed herself into the smallest space she could find while bullets tore through walls around her. "They're flanking!" Luca fired his 3 rounds at shadows moving along the warehouse's perimeter. One shadow fell. The others kept coming. Massimo threw his empty pistol aside and pulled his knife. "Get ready." "For what?" "Close quarters." The first contractor reached the boat and climbed aboard. Massimo met him at the deck's edge. The knife flashed once, twice. The contractor collapsed, clutching his throat. 2 more contractors appeared. Massimo fought like something wild and desperate. No technique, no finesse, just brutal efficiency born from a lifetime of violence. But there were too many. One contractor got past Massimo's defense and slammed a rifle stock into his wounded shoulder. Massimo went down with a roar of pain. The contractor raised his weapon. Eliza shot him. The gun in her hand kicked violently. The bullet caught the contractor in the chest. He stumbled backward and fell off the boat's deck to the warehouse floor below. She had killed someone. Again.
The realization didn't hit as hard this time. Massimo struggled to his feet, his shoulder bleeding freely now. Thanks. Don't mention it. 3 more contractors climbed onto the boat. Massimo grabbed a length of pipe and swung it like a club. Bones cracked. Men screamed. But for every one they dropped, another appeared. They were being overrun. Luca fired his last round and threw the empty pistol at an approaching contractor. It bounced off the man's chest uselessly. That's it, Luca gasped. I'm done. No, you're not. Massimo pulled him upright. We're getting out of here. How? Good question. They were trapped on a boat inside a warehouse surrounded by professional killers. No ammunition, no exit, no hope. Then Eliza saw it. A chain suspended from the warehouse's ceiling crane system. It ended in a massive hook designed for lifting boat sections during construction. The chain ran along a track toward a loading door on the far wall. The crane, she said. Massimo followed her gaze. Understanding dawned. That's insane. You have a better idea? He didn't. They ran for the crane controls mounted on a platform near the boat's stern. Contractors shouted and gave chase. Massimo reached the controls first and started pressing buttons. Motors groaned to life overhead. The crane's hook began moving along its track. Grab the chain, Massimo yelled. Eliza wrapped her arms around the thick chain. Luca did the same, his face gray with pain. Massimo hit another button and the chain started lifting. They rose into the air as contractors reached the platform. Bullets whined past them. One caught Massimo's leg. He grunted but held on. The chain carried them across the warehouse toward the loading door. Below, contractors ran to intercept. The loading door was closed. Locked. There was no way through. Brace yourself, Massimo shouted. He hit a button on the controls he'd grabbed. The crane suddenly accelerated. They crashed through the loading door in an explosion of wood and metal. Daylight blinded them. They were outside, still suspended from the chain, swinging wildly over the alley. Let go! Massimo released the chain and dropped. Eliza and Luca followed. They hit the ground hard. Eliza's broken ribs screamed. Luca didn't get up. Massimo grabbed him and started dragging him toward the street. A car screeched around the corner. For a moment, Eliza thought it was more contractors. Then she saw Victor Draven in the driver's seat. Get in! He leaned out the window. Before I change my mind about this alliance... They didn't have time to question it. Massimo shoved Luca into the back seat and climbed in after him. Eliza dove into the passenger seat. Draven accelerated before her door was fully closed. Contractors poured from the warehouse behind them, firing. Bullets punched through the car's rear window. Draven took a corner at 60 miles per hour, tires screaming. Why are you helping us? Eliza shouted over the chaos. Because Mercer just made a very stupid mistake. Draven's voice was calm despite the violence. He put a contract on you without consulting the other families. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So you're rescuing us out of professional courtesy? I'm rescuing you because watching Mercer's empire collapse is more valuable than $2 million. Draven took another corner. They were heading toward the city center now. More traffic, more witnesses. The contractors would have to back off or risk exposure. Where are we going? Massimo pressed his hand against the bullet wound in his leg. Somewhere Mercer can't reach. Somewhere he can't buy loyalty. Draven glanced in the rearview mirror. I'm taking you to the one place in the city where contracts don't mean anything. There's no such place. There is now. Draven's smile was sharp. I'm taking you to the police. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You're insane, Massimo said. I'm practical. Mercer wants you dead quietly. Disappearing into police custody makes that impossible. It forces him to either abandon the contract or escalate so publicly that every organization will turn against him. Draven drove through a red light. Horns blared. Sometimes the best weapon is exposure. The police will arrest us. Yes. And then I'll bail you out using lawyers so expensive they make judges nervous. You'll be front-page news, protected by the system Mercer can't openly challenge. Draven pulled into a parking garage near the central police station. It's not freedom, but it's better than dead. Eliza looked at Massimo. His shoulder and leg were bleeding. He looked exhausted, defeated, but alive. He's right, she said quietly. We don't have another play. Massimo stared at the police station visible through the garage's entrance.
Everything he had spent his life building was based on staying invisible, operating in the shadows where official oversight couldn't reach. Walking into that building meant surrendering control. "Do it," Luca whispered from the back seat. "I'm dying, Massimo. I need doctors, real ones, not the kind we can bribe for silence." That decided it. They climbed out of the car. Draven stayed behind the wheel. "I'll have my lawyers there within the hour. Don't say anything until they arrive. Not a word." "Why are you doing this?" Eliza asked. "Because the rules are changing, the old power structures are collapsing, and I'd rather be on the winning side when the dust settles." Draven's expression was unreadable. "You survived when you shouldn't have. That makes you either very lucky or very dangerous. Either way, you're worth investing in." He drove away, leaving them standing in the garage. Massimo pulled Luca's arm over his shoulder. "Let's get this over with." They walked into the police station looking like refugees from a war zone. Blood-soaked, battered, armed. The desk sergeant's hand moved to his weapon the moment they entered. "Don't move!" "We're not armed," Massimo lied. He carefully set his knife on the desk. "We're here to report a crime." Within seconds, they were surrounded by officers with weapons drawn. Someone shouted orders. Hands grabbed Eliza and forced her face first against the wall. Cold metal cuffs bit into her wrists. "Eliza Vale, you're under arrest for—" The officer paused. "What exactly are we arresting her for?" "Everything," another officer said. "I've got warrants from 3 jurisdictions: theft, assault, murder." Murder. The word echoed in Eliza's head as they dragged her toward holding cells. She caught a glimpse of Massimo being handcuffed and searched. Luca being loaded onto a stretcher by paramedics who looked horrified by his condition. They separated them. Eliza ended up in a bare interview room with fluorescent lights and a metal table. Hours passed. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody offered food or water or medical attention. She sat in the uncomfortable chair and watched the clock on the wall tick forward. Each minute felt like an eternity. Finally, the door opened. A detective entered. Middle-aged, gray hair, eyes that had seen too much. "Miss Vale, I'm Detective Morris. We need to talk." "I want a lawyer." "Your lawyer is in the building. Very expensive lawyer, the kind that makes captains nervous." Morris sat across from her. "But before he gets here, I want to know one thing. Are you being held against your will by Massimo DeLuca?" "No." "Because if you are, we can protect you. Witness protection, new identity, the whole program." "I'm not a victim." Morris studied her face. "You look like a victim."
Looks can be deceiving. Eliza met his eyes without flinching. "I'm exactly where I chose to be." "Then you're either brave or stupid." "Probably both." The door opened again. A man in a suit that cost more than Eliza's entire education entered. He looked at Morris with the kind of disdain usually reserved for insects. "My client won't be answering any questions. If you have charges, file them. If not, release her." Morris stood. "She's connected to at least 4 homicides in the past 72 hours. "Prove it." The lawyer's smile was cold. "And while you're trying, consider that my firm represents several very wealthy individuals who donate generously to the Police Benevolent Fund. It would be unfortunate if those donations suddenly stopped." Morris's jaw tightened, but he left without another word. The lawyer sat across from Eliza. "My name is Carson. Victor Draven retained my services. I'm going to get you out of here, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, say nothing to anyone, understood?" "What about Massimo and his brother?" "Being handled separately."
"Luca's in surgery. Massimo's being processed for multiple outstanding warrants, but he'll be out within 24 hours. Carson pulled out a tablet and started typing. "You, however, are a more complicated case. You're technically not wanted for anything concrete, just connected to investigations." "So I can leave?"
"In theory. In practice, they'll hold you as long as possible, hoping you'll say something incriminating." He looked up. "How much illegal activity have you been involved in during the past 3 days?" Eliza thought about the stolen cars, the break-in at the bank, the people she'd killed. "Enough. Then we'll need to get creative."
Carson left. Hours passed. Eliza dozed in the chair, too exhausted to stay awake. When she woke, the clock showed it was after midnight. She'd been in the station for almost 12 hours. The door opened. Not Carson this time. Not Morris. Gideon Mercer. His arm was in a sling from the bullet wound. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He looked older than he had in the warehouse, tired, but still dangerous. "Hello, Miss Vale." He closed the door behind him. "We need to have a conversation."
Eliza's pulse spiked. "How did you get in here?" "I have friends everywhere, including this police station." He sat down slowly, favoring his wounded shoulder. "The question isn't how I got in. It's whether you're smart enough to listen to what I'm about to offer. I'm not interested in anything you're selling, not even your life." Mercer leaned forward. "Because right now, you're sitting in a police station surrounded by officers who would happily look the other way while I walk you out a side entrance to a waiting car. Nobody would ever see you again. My lawyer is being delayed by a very convenient traffic accident. He won't arrive for at least another hour." Mercer's smile was thin. "Plenty of time for us to conclude our business." Eliza's hand moved to her pocket. Empty. They'd taken everything when they arrested her. "What do you want?" "The bank records, all copies, digital and physical." Mercer's voice was calm, reasonable. "Give them to me and I'll make all of this disappear. The warrants, the investigations, the contract on your head. You and the DeLuca brothers walk away clean." "Why would I trust you?" "Because I'm the only person offering you a way out that doesn't end with you bleeding in an alley." He pulled out a phone and showed her a photograph. Massimo in a different holding cell, unconscious, with two men standing over him. "Those are my people. One word from me and they make sure he never wakes up. Then they do the same to his brother. Then they come for you." Eliza's throat tightened. "You'd kill us inside a police station?" "I've killed people in churches. Police stations are just buildings with slightly better security." Mercer pocketed the phone. "Last chance, Miss Vale. The records. Now. They're encrypted. I can't access them without the password your father gave you in that letter." Mercer's smile widened. "I had someone read it while you were being processed. The password is your mother's maiden name combined with your birth year. Very sentimental, very predictable. He knew everything. Had planned for everything, and she was trapped in a room with a man who had already proven he was willing to kill to protect his secrets." Eliza thought about her father bleeding out on a warehouse floor, about Massimo taking a bullet to help her escape, about Luca beaten and broken but still trying to warn them. She thought about the waitress she used to be, the girl who believed working hard and following rules would eventually lead to safety. That girl was dead. What remained was someone who had learned to survive in a world where rules were just suggestions and safety was an illusion. "The records are in a secure cloud server," she lied. "I need a computer to access them." Mercer studied her face, looking for deception, for weakness. Whatever he saw made him nod. "Then let's go find a computer." He stood and opened the door. Two men in police uniforms waited outside. Not real cops. Mercer's contractors wearing stolen badges. They walked through the police station like they owned it. Nobody stopped them. Nobody questioned why a prisoner was being escorted by unknown officers. The corruption ran deeper than Eliza had imagined. They reached a back exit. A car waited outside. Black, expensive, engine running. Mercer gestured for her to get inside. "After you." This was it. The moment where she either gave up or fought back with nothing but desperation and rage. Eliza stepped toward the car. Her mind raced. No weapon, no backup. No plan except to stall and hope something changed. Then the car's window exploded inward. The driver slumped forward, dead. More gunfire erupted from somewhere across the street. Mercer's contractors dove for cover. One went down immediately. The other returned fire blindly. Massimo DeLuca emerged from the shadows, limping but armed, his face a mask of pure violence. Behind him, Luca leaned heavily on Victor Draven for support. "Get down!" Massimo fired twice. Both fake cops dropped. Mercer grabbed Eliza and used her as a shield, his good arm wrapped around her throat. "Don't move or I snap her neck." Massimo's weapon didn't waver. "Let her go." "I don't think so." Mercer backed toward the car, dragging Eliza with him. "She's my insurance policy now. Lower your weapon or—" Eliza drove her elbow backward into his wounded shoulder. Mercer screamed and his grip loosened. She dropped and rolled away. Massimo fired. The bullet caught Mercer in the chest. He stumbled backward against the car, eyes wide with shock. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He slid down the car's side and collapsed onto the pavement. Blood pooled beneath him.
His eyes stared at nothing. Gideon Mercer was dead. Massimo grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled her toward another vehicle. Move! They ran through the parking lot as alarms blared inside the police station. Real cops would respond soon. They had maybe seconds before this entire area became a war zone. Draven had a van waiting. They piled inside and he accelerated hard, tires screaming. Behind them, officers poured from the station entrance, weapons drawn, shouting orders nobody could hear over the chaos. "Where are we going?" Eliza gasped. "Airport." Draven took a corner too fast. "I have a plane fueled and ready. You're leaving the country. Tonight." "We can't just—" "You don't have a choice." Draven's voice was sharp. "Mercer's dead. His organization is going to collapse, but not before they try to tie up loose ends. That means you, all of you." Massimo checked his weapon. "Where's the plane going?" "Wherever you want. I have connections in 15 countries. Pick one and disappear." They drove through the city at dangerous speeds, weaving through traffic and running red lights. Behind them, police sirens wailed. Ahead, the airport lights glowed in the darkness. Draven pulled into a private hangar on the airport's far side. A small jet sat on the tarmac, engines already running. A pilot waited by the stairs. "That's your ride." Draven killed the engine. "Go now, before someone realizes what's happening." They climbed out. Luca could barely walk. Massimo had to support him. Eliza's entire body hurt, but she forced herself to move. At the plane's stairs, Massimo turned back to Draven. "Why did you do all this?" "Because the world's changing, and I'm betting on the people who survive change instead of the ones who try to stop it." Draven smiled. "Besides, you owe me now. That's worth more than money." They climbed aboard the plane. The pilot closed the door and immediately taxied toward the runway. Through the window, Eliza watched Baltimore's lights grow smaller. Inside the cabin, Luca lay across a row of seats, barely conscious. Massimo collapsed into a chair, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. Eliza sat across from him. "What do we do now?" "We survive." Massimo's voice was hollow. "That's all we've got left." The plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the night sky. Below, the city became a grid of lights and shadows. Somewhere down there, investigations were starting. Bodies were being counted, organizations were fragmenting, and 3 people who should have died were flying toward an uncertain future with nothing but stolen documents and each other. Eliza looked at Massimo, at Luca dying slowly across the aisle, at her own blood-covered hands. She had started this week as a waitress trying to afford nursing school. She was ending it as a fugitive flying to a foreign country with a crime boss and his broken brother. The plane climbed higher. The city disappeared beneath the clouds. And Eliza closed her eyes, too exhausted to think about what came next. The plane landed in Portugal just before dawn. Eliza woke to the sound of wheels touching tarmac and the pilot's voice crackling through the intercom. She had slept fitfully, haunted by images of burning buildings and dead men staring at nothing. Her neck ached from the awkward angle against the window. Her broken ribs felt like they were grinding together with every breath. Across from her, Massimo sat awake, staring at his hands. Blood had dried under his fingernails. His shoulder and leg were wrapped in makeshift bandages that needed changing hours ago. He looked like a man who had aged a decade in 3 days. Luca hadn't moved from the back seats. A private doctor waited on the tarmac with an ambulance. The moment the plane door opened, medical personnel rushed aboard and loaded him onto a stretcher. His pulse was weak, his breathing shallow. "He needs surgery," one of the doctors said in accented English. "Immediate surgery, internal bleeding." "Then take him." Massimo's voice was hollow. "Do whatever it takes." They carried Luca away. The ambulance disappeared into the gray Portuguese morning, sirens wailing. Massimo and Eliza stood on the tarmac watching it go. "He might not make it," Eliza said quietly. "I know." A black car waited near the hangar, Victor Draven's local contact. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and the kind of efficiency that suggested she had handled situations like this before. "I'm Helena." She opened the car door without offering a handshake. Mr. Draven arranged a safe house, medical supplies, everything you need to disappear for a while. They drove through Lisbon as the city woke. Narrow cobblestone streets, pastel buildings with terracotta roofs, people heading to work who had no idea 2 American fugitives were passing through their morning commute. The safe house was an apartment in Alfama, The old district. Third floor. Small balcony overlooking red rooftops and the Tagus River in the distance. Furniture that looked like it came from a catalog. No personal touches. The kind of place designed to be forgotten.
Helena handed Massimo a key. Food in the refrigerator. First aid supplies in the bathroom. Phones are clean and untraceable. Use them sparingly. She paused at the door. Mr. Draven says you have 48 hours before his network can't guarantee your safety anymore. After that, you're on your own. She left without waiting for thanks. Massimo locked the door and immediately checked every window, every exit, every possible approach. Old habits from a life spent looking over his shoulder. Eliza collapsed onto the couch. What happens now? Now we wait. Massimo moved to the bathroom. Wait for news about Luca. Wait to see if anyone followed us. Wait to figure out if we're actually safe or just delaying the inevitable. She heard water running, the sound of him hissing in pain as he cleaned his wounds. When he emerged 20 minutes later, he looked slightly more human. Clean clothes from a closet that apparently existed for this exact purpose. Fresh bandages, hair wet from the shower. Your turn, he gestured toward the bathroom. Eliza showered until the water ran cold, watched blood and dirt circle the drain, studied her reflection in the steamed mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow eyes, bruises covering most of her visible skin, a split lip that would leave a scar. The waitress from Blackwater City was truly gone now. She dressed in clothes that fit well enough. Jeans, a simple shirt, everything neutral and forgettable. When she came out, Massimo had made coffee. Real coffee, not the instant garbage she was used to. Drink. He handed her a cup. You'll need the caffeine. They sat in silence for a long time. The morning light grew stronger through the windows. Lisbon's sounds drifted up from the street. Church bells. Traffic. People living normal lives. I need to know something, Eliza finally said. When you walked into that emergency room 3 days ago, when you decided to take me instead of leaving me for the Russians, why? Massimo stared into his coffee. Because I saw Luca's conspiracy board and realized whatever he found was bigger than family business, bigger than territory or money or any of the usual reasons people kill each other. He looked up. And because when I looked at you, I saw someone who didn't deserve to die for sins they didn't commit. That's not the whole truth. No, it's not. He set down his cup. The whole truth is I was tired. Tired of the violence. Tired of burying people I cared about. Tired of pretending that what we do is somehow noble or necessary. His voice went quiet. I thought maybe saving you would balance the scales somehow. Make up for all the people I couldn't save. Does it? No, but at least you're breathing. Eliza's phone buzzed, the clean, untraceable phone Helena had left. She picked it up with shaking hands. A text from an unknown number. Your father's records are now public. Every major news outlet, every government agency. The offshore account conspiracy is headline news. She showed Massimo. He read it twice. Draven. He leaked them? He said the best weapon was exposure. Massimo's jaw tightened. He wasn't lying. By making everything public, he destroyed the value of keeping us alive. Nobody benefits from killing witnesses when the whole world already knows the truth. Another text arrived. Mercer's organization is collapsing. His contractors are turning on each other. The Volkov syndicate is fracturing. You're old news now. Congratulations on surviving. Eliza read the message 3 times. Is it really over? The immediate danger? Yes. But you can never go back to America. Never use your real name. Never contact anyone from your old life. Massimo stood and moved to the window. You're a ghost now, same as me. What about you? The DeLuca family? Your territory? Gone. The moment I disappeared, my rivals moved in. By now, everything I built is being carved up and redistributed. He didn't sound upset. If anything, he sounded relieved. I have offshore accounts Draven doesn't know about. Enough money to live comfortably for a long time. Just not as Massimo DeLuca. Who are you now? I don't know yet. Haven't figured that part out. The apartment's phone rang, an actual landline attached to the wall like something from another era. Massimo answered it. Yes. A pause. Understood. We're coming now. He hung up. Luca's out of surgery. He's stable. We can visit. They took a taxi to the hospital,
A modern building on the city's outskirts, clean, efficient, nothing like the overcrowded emergency room where this nightmare had started. Luca was in a private room on the 4th floor. Tubes connected him to machines that beeped rhythmically. His face was still swollen and bruised, but he was conscious. "You look like hell," Massimo said. "You should see the other guys." Luca's voice was rough. "Oh, wait. They're all dead. Most of them." Luca's expression grew serious. "I heard about Mercer, about the records going public. Draven's work. Smart play." Luca shifted in the bed and winced. "So what now? We hide here until we're old men? Something like that. I always wanted to learn Portuguese." Luca closed his eyes. "Maybe open a restaurant, make terrible pasta and charge tourists too much. You don't know how to cook. I'll learn. Got nothing but time now." Massimo reached out and gripped his brother's hand. For a moment, the cold businessman disappeared entirely. What remained was just a man grateful his brother was alive. "I'm sorry," Massimo said quietly, "for not finding you sooner, for letting you get caught up in this. I got caught up in this myself, made my own choices." Luca opened his eyes. "But you came for me. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a while. Then Luca looked at Eliza. "You know what the funny thing is? All those months I spent following you around Blackwater City, taking photographs, trying to figure out why you mattered." He smiled weakly. "I thought you were connected to criminal networks, money laundering, something sinister. Never occurred to me you were just a waitress whose father tried to do something good. Would it have changed anything if you'd known? Probably not. But it's a better story this way." His eyes drifted closed again. "The innocent girl and the crime boss. Sounds like something out of a movie." "Reality's messier than movies," Eliza said. "Yeah, it usually is." A nurse appeared and politely informed them visiting hours were over. Luca needed rest. They could come back tomorrow. Outside the hospital, Massimo and Eliza stood in the parking lot as afternoon sun broke through the clouds. Portugal felt like another planet compared to Blackwater City. Warmer, slower, less sharp around the edges. "I have to ask you something," Massimo said, "and I need an honest answer." "Okay? Do you blame me? For pulling you into this? For everything that happened?" Eliza thought about it. Really thought about it. "No, I blame the men who attacked me in that park. I blame Mercer for setting this in motion. I blame my father for thinking he could fix the world by hiding from it." She looked at Massimo. "But not you. You kept me alive when nobody else cared if I lived or died." "I cared." "I know." She surprised herself by meaning it. "And that's why I don't blame you." They walked back toward Alfama. Took the long route. Through narrow streets where laundry hung between buildings and old women sat in doorways watching the world pass. Nobody recognized them. Nobody cared who they used to be. "I need to figure out what happens next," Eliza said. "I can't just hide in that apartment forever." "What do you want to do?" She hadn't thought about it, hadn't let herself think beyond survival. But now, walking through a foreign city where nobody knew her name or her history, possibilities opened up. "I want to finish nursing school, under a different name, in a different country." She surprised herself with how certain she sounded. "My father spent 15 years giving blood money to people who needed help. Maybe I can do something similar, actually help people instead of just serving them coffee." That's not a small goal. Nothing about the past 3 days has been small. Massimo nodded slowly. "I have connections. People who can create documents, get you enrolled in programs that don't ask too many questions. It'll take time and money, but it's possible." "Why would you help me do that?" "Because you deserve a chance to become something other than a victim. Or a fugitive." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "And because somewhere along the way, keeping you alive became more important than anything else." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to fully examine. "I'm not looking for a relationship," Eliza said carefully. "I'm too broken for that right now." "So am I." Massimo's voice was honest, raw. "But that doesn't mean we can't look out for each other." They continued walking, reached the apartment as the sun began setting over the river. Inside, Massimo ordered food from a local restaurant. They ate at the small table in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. Later, as darkness fell over Lisbon, Eliza stood on the balcony and watched lights come on across the city. Somewhere out there, her father's records were being analyzed by journalists and investigators. The conspiracy he died protecting was being exposed piece by piece. His attempt to do something good with stolen money was becoming public knowledge. She pulled out her phone and composed a text to Victor Draven. "Thank you for the records going public. My father would have wanted people to know." The response came quickly. "Your father was either a saint or a fool. History will decide which. Either way, his work is done. Now focus on yours." She pocketed the phone. Draven was right. Her father's story was over. His choices made, his sacrifices complete. Now she had to figure out her own story. Massimo appeared on the balcony beside her. He didn't say anything, just stood there, looking out at the city, his shoulder touching hers in a way that felt deliberate. "When I was 12 and my father died," Eliza said quietly, "I promised myself I'd survive no matter what, that I'd make something of myself despite everything working against me." She paused. "I thought that meant getting a degree, a good job, a normal life. And now? Now I think survival looks different than I imagined." She turned to face him. "I think it looks like accepting you can't go back to who you were, only forward into who you're becoming. That's a hard truth to live with. All the good ones are." They stayed on the balcony until the cold drove them inside. Massimo disappeared into one of the bedrooms without saying goodnight. Eliza took the other room. The bed was comfortable, the sheets were clean, but sleep came slowly. When it finally arrived, she dreamed of her father, not bleeding out on a warehouse floor, but younger, healthier, standing in their old kitchen, teaching her how to make pancakes. In the dream, he smiled and told her she was going to be okay, that she had survived the worst of it. She woke believing him. Days passed. They fell into a strange routine. Mornings at the hospital visiting Luca, who grew stronger each day. Afternoons exploring Lisbon like tourists. Evenings in the apartment, planning their next moves. Massimo made calls to his network, arranged for new documents, set up accounts under false names, built the infrastructure for their new identities the way other people might plan a vacation. Eliza researched nursing programs in Europe, found one in Spain that accepted international students with flexible entry requirements. She applied under her new name, Sarah Mitchell, the same name from the fake ID they'd used at the bank. 2 weeks after arriving in Portugal, Luca was released from the hospital. He moved into the apartment with them, 3 fugitives sharing a small space, learning to be normal people. It didn't come naturally. Luca jumped at loud noises. Massimo checked the locks compulsively. Eliza had nightmares most nights and woke gasping for air, but slowly, incrementally, they healed. 1 month after Baltimore, Eliza received her acceptance letter from the nursing program in Madrid. She stared at the email for a long time, unable to process that it was real. "You did it," Massimo said when she showed him. "I didn't do anything. You arranged this." "I arranged the paperwork. You earned it." He smiled, genuine, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "When do you start?" 6 weeks? Then we have time to celebrate." That night they went to a restaurant in Bairro Alto, sat on a terrace overlooking the city lights, ordered wine that cost more than Eliza used to make in a week. Luca told terrible jokes. Massimo relaxed enough to laugh. Eliza felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Temporary, fragile peace, but real nonetheless. On the walk home, Massimo pulled her aside on a quiet street corner. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "When you leave for Madrid, I'm not coming with you." The words hit harder than expected. "Why not?" "Because you need space to become who you're going to be, and I need to figure out how to be something other than what I was." His voice was steady, certain. "We can't build new lives if we're clinging to each other out of trauma. So this is goodbye?" "This is see you later." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone, clean, untraceable. "My number's already programmed in. If you need anything, if you're in danger, if you just want to talk, call me. And if I don't call, then I'll know you made it out, that you built something good from all this destruction." He touched her face gently. "And that'll be enough." Eliza felt tears burning her eyes. "What will you do?" "Luca wants to open that restaurant. I think I'll help him. Learn to cook. Learn to be someone who creates things instead of destroying them." He smiled sadly. "It's not much of a plan.
But it's more than I had 3 months ago. They stood there on the street corner while people walked past. Two broken people who had survived the unsurvivable, who had learned to pull triggers and make impossible choices and live with consequences that would never fully fade. "Thank you," Eliza said, "for everything. Don't thank me. Just survive. That's all I ask." She kissed him, quick, gentle. Not the beginning of something new, but the acknowledgement of what they'd been through together. When she pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Go to Madrid," he said quietly. "Become the person your father wanted you to be. The person you fought so hard to become. What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you'll fail trying."
6 weeks later, Eliza stood in a Madrid apartment that was technically hers. Small, affordable on the stipend the program provided. A view of other apartments and a narrow street where delivery trucks idled at odd hours. It was perfect. She enrolled in classes, met other students who knew nothing about her past, learned medical terminology in Spanish, and struggled through anatomy coursework that made her nursing school in America look easy. She called Massimo once a month. Short conversations about nothing important. He told her about the restaurant, how Luca was learning to make real Italian pasta, how they had hired local staff and were teaching them recipes Massimo's mother used to make. She told him about her classes, about the patients she worked with during clinical rotations, about the people she was helping. They never talked about Baltimore, never discussed the bodies they left behind or the scars they still carried. Some things were better left in the past. 1 year after the nightmare began, Eliza received a letter forwarded through Victor Draven's network. No return address, just a single sheet of paper with handwriting she didn't recognize. "Miss Vale, you don't know me, but I know your father. He asked me to contact you if anything happened to him. I'm writing to let you know that before he died, he made arrangements. Scholarship funds in your name, distributed to medical students who can't afford their education. He wanted to make sure others didn't struggle the way you did. The funds are managed by a trust that can't be traced back to you. You'll never have to explain where the money came from, but hundreds of students will graduate because your father decided blood money could be transformed into something good. He was right, and you should be proud." A friend. Eliza read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in a box where she kept the few things that mattered. Her father's letter from the safe deposit box. The fake ID that had become her real identity. A photograph of her and Massimo taken in Lisbon on one of the good days. She stood at her apartment window and watched Madrid wake up. Somewhere out there, students were starting their medical education funded by money stolen from criminals and redistributed by a man who thought he could balance scales that were never meant to be balanced. Her father had been wrong about a lot of things. But maybe he'd been right about this. 2 years after Baltimore, Eliza graduated from the nursing program. Top of her class. She got job offers from 3 hospitals, chose the one that worked with underserved populations, the patients who couldn't afford private care, the ones the system had given up on. People like she used to be. On her first day, she wore a name tag that read Sarah Mitchell, RN. Nobody questioned it. Nobody knew the person she used to be or the things she'd done to survive. That night, she called Massimo. "I did it," she said when he answered. "I actually did it. I never doubted you would." His voice was warm, proud. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying. And right. And like maybe everything we went through wasn't completely pointless." "It wasn't pointless. You're proof of that." They talked for an hour. About the restaurant that was now successful enough to need a second location. About Luca, who had met someone and was talking about settling down. About the life they'd built from the ashes of their old ones. "Do you ever regret it?" Eliza asked. "Walking away from the DeLuca family, giving up everything." Massimo was quiet for a long time. "No, what I had wasn't a life. It was just survival dressed up in expensive suits and deadly consequences." A pause. "This is better, smaller, but better. I'm glad." "Me too." They said goodbye. Eliza hung up and stood at her window watching the Madrid night. Somewhere across the ocean, Massimo was probably doing the same thing. 2 people connected by trauma and survival, and the strange understanding that came from walking through hell together. She thought about the girl who had stumbled into that emergency room covered in blood and afraid of everything. That girl was gone. Dead and buried alongside everyone else who hadn't survived the war that almost consumed them all. What remained was someone stronger, harder, but not broken. Never broken. The next morning, Eliza showed up for her second day of work. A woman came into the emergency room with a split lip and frightened eyes. Young, maybe 23, holding herself like someone who expected the next hit to come any second. Eliza recognized that posture, had worn it herself once. "I'm Sarah," she said gently. "I'm going to help you. You're safe now." The woman started crying. Eliza held her hand and let her cry, helped her fill out paperwork, made sure she got connected to resources that could actually help. Later, when the woman was gone and the emergency room had quieted, Eliza stood at the nurse's station and thought about her father, about Massimo, about everyone who had died so she could stand here doing work that mattered. She couldn't bring them back, couldn't undo the violence or erase the scars, but she could make sure their deaths counted for something. One patient at a time, one life saved, one person helped. It wasn't redemption. Redemption was a fantasy, but it was purpose, and purpose was enough. 3 years after Baltimore, on a random Tuesday in April, Eliza received a text from an unknown number. "Turn on the news, international section." She pulled up a news site on her phone. The headline made her breath catch. "International Crime Network Dismantled. Authorities Credit Anonymous. Leaked Documents." The article detailed how her father's records had sparked investigations across multiple countries, how dozens of criminal organizations had been exposed and prosecuted, how billions in stolen assets had been recovered and redirected to legitimate programs. The final paragraph mentioned that the original source of the leaked documents remained unknown, but investigators believed it was the work of someone within the criminal networks who had grown disillusioned with the violence. "Your father's work just took down the people who killed him," the text continued. "Thought you'd want to know." It was from Draven. Had to be. Nobody else would have known to contact her. She didn't respond, just stood in her small Madrid apartment reading the article over and over. Her father had spent 15 years trying to fix unfixable problems, trying to transform blood money into something clean. He had succeeded. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to matter. That evening she called Massimo, told him about the article. "Good," was all he said. "It's finally over." "Is it ever really over?" "No, but we can pretend it is. That's close enough." They talked until late into the night. About nothing important, about everything that mattered, about the life they'd built separately, and the understanding that connected them across distance and time. When she finally hung up, Eliza realized she was smiling. Actually smiling. Not the polite social smile she used at work, but something genuine. Something that came from deep inside where the broken pieces had finally started fitting back together. She went to bed that night and slept without nightmares for the first time in years. 5 years after Baltimore, Eliza stood in a Madrid hospital wearing scrubs and a stethoscope around her neck. A senior nurse now, training newer staff, making decisions that saved lives. She had built something real from the wreckage, something that mattered. Her phone buzzed, a text from Massimo. "Luca's getting married next month. Restaurant ceremony? Small. If you want to come, you're invited. No pressure." Eliza stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "I'll be there." A month later, she flew to Lisbon. Took a taxi to a restaurant in Alfama with a view of the river. The sign out front read Fratelli in elegant script. Brothers. Inside, the place was beautiful, warm lighting, tables filled with friends and family. Luca stood at the front wearing a suit that actually fit, looking healthier than she'd ever seen him. His bride was Portuguese, pretty, happy. Massimo stood beside his brother as best man. When he saw Eliza enter, his expression shifted. Something like relief mixed with joy, mixed with the acknowledgement of how far they'd both come. After the ceremony, they stood on the restaurant's terrace overlooking the city. "You look good," Massimo said. "So do you." It was true. The hardness had softened. The constant vigilance had eased. He looked like someone who had finally stopped running. "I heard you're training new nurses now." Someone has to teach them how to survive hospital politics. Better than teaching them how to survive actual bullets. They both laughed. Real laughter. The kind that acknowledged how absurd their lives had become. "Do you ever think about that night?" Eliza asked. "The emergency room, where it all started." "Every day."
Massimo's voice was quiet. I think about the choice I made, taking you instead of leaving you, how that one decision changed everything. Regret it? Never. He turned to face her. Because of that choice, I'm standing here at my brother's wedding instead of attending his funeral. Because of that choice, you're saving lives instead of dying in an alley. The cost was high, but the alternative was worse.
Eliza nodded slowly. I used to think my father was a coward for running away, for letting me believe he was dead. She looked out at the city lights. Now I think he was just trying to survive in a world that didn't leave room for good people. He was both, coward and hero. Most people are. What are we? Massimo considered the question. Survivors. That's all we ever were. All we'll ever be. Music drifted from inside the restaurant. Luca was dancing with his new wife. Other guests joined them, a celebration of life after so much death. Dance with me, Eliza said. I don't dance. Neither do I. Let's be terrible together. They went inside, moved clumsily to music they didn't know in a language they barely spoke. Two broken people who had learned to live with their scars instead of being defined by them. Later, when the night grew late and guests began leaving, Massimo walked Eliza to her taxi. Will I see you again? He asked. I don't know, maybe. She paused. But I know you're out there, that you're okay, that's enough. Same. He kissed her forehead. Go save more lives, Sarah Mitchell. Go cook more pasta, whoever you are now. The taxi pulled away. Eliza watched through the rear window as Massimo stood on the street, one hand raised in farewell. Then he turned and walked back into the restaurant where his brother's wedding was still celebrating. The taxi drove through Lisbon's narrow streets, past the apartment where they'd hidden, past the hospital where Luca had recovered, past all the places where their impossible survival had begun. When she reached the airport, Eliza boarded her flight back to Madrid, back to her work, back to the life she'd built from absolutely nothing. She settled into her seat and closed her eyes, thought about her father watching from a distance, about Massimo learning to cook in a restaurant by the river, about all the people who hadn't survived so that she could. The plane lifted into the night sky. Below, Portugal disappeared into darkness, and Eliza opened her eyes and looked forward, not back at what she'd lost or who she'd been, but forward at who she was becoming. A nurse who saved lives, a survivor who refused to let trauma define her, a woman who had learned that sometimes the only way to win was to keep breathing when everything tried to make you stop. The seatbelt sign turned off. Around her, passengers settled in for the flight. Normal people living normal lives who would never know what she'd been through or how hard she'd fought to be sitting here among them. And that was fine. Better than fine. Because somewhere between the emergency room and this airplane seat, Eliza Vale had died and Sarah Mitchell had been born. Not from running away. Not from hiding. But from choosing to survive despite impossible odds. From transforming pain into purpose. From learning that the best revenge against the people who tried to destroy you was building something beautiful from the wreckage they left behind. She pulled out her phone, typed one final message to Massimo. Thank you for that night in the emergency room, for choosing to save me when you didn't have to, for teaching me that survival isn't the same as living, but it's where living starts. His response came before the plane demanded phones be put away. Thank you for reminding me that some people are worth saving, even when it costs everything. Eliza pocketed the phone, looked out the window at the stars scattered across the infinite darkness, and for the first time since her father died, she felt something close to hope. Not the naive hope of someone who believed the world was fair or kind, but the hard-earned hope of someone who had walked through hell and come out the other side still breathing, still fighting, still refusing to give up. That was enough. That would always be enough. The plane cut through the night sky, carrying her toward tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, carrying her away from the violence and toward the quiet work of healing, her own healing, and the healing she could bring to others. Below, cities glowed like scattered embers. Above, stars burned in the infinite dark. And between them, Eliza flew forward into whatever came next, scarred but unbroken, changed but not destroyed, alive in a way that mattered.